The clock struck noon as the meeting began in a low-key cafe. The woman sitting at the table made no effort to hide her wealth. A flawless suit, gold earrings, and a gemstone necklace practically screaming luxury. Across from her, the job candidate could barely contain his excitement, already mentally calculating how much he could make working for such a powerful boss. But the mood turned sour fast. Frustrated, she spun the laptop screen toward him and questioned whether he even knew how to read. The job posting rules were crystal clear, and she didn't hold back. The position was strictly for women. Having a man show up was an unacceptable mistake. Caught off guard, he swallowed his embarrassment and tried to calm things down. He only asked for a few minutes to prove himself, promising he'd disappear immediately if she didn't like what he brought to the table. After checking her watch and realizing she had some time to spare, the woman decided to give him a shot. The mission was simple: act as a ruthless consultant to guarantee total success in blind dates. Without missing a beat, the guy pulled over the keyboard, ran a quick analysis, and launched into his first killer strategy. Based on direct data, he claimed that women with long hair had more than 4 times the dating success rate compared to those who preferred shortcuts. He kept throwing out statistics, saying that highly educated women saw their romantic chances plummet to barely 2%. That was the final straw for the boss. She cut him off immediately, dismissing the useless statistics and making it clear she needed a practical, flawless system to find the perfect partner. No nonsense. Trying to save the deal, the candidate leaned into fate, claiming their meeting had a purpose, even offering a 20% discount on his service to seal the agreement. The tactic backfired badly. Annoyed at having wasted her morning, she stood up to leave, repeating that she would only work with a woman. Panic kicked in. The guy rushed forward and blocked her exit, swearing blind loyalty and promising to do anything she asked, following every order without question. To prove he wasn't bluffing, he made a drastic move and ran toward the restroom. Before disappearing, he begged for just 10 minutes, promising a shocking demonstration of his skills. Hooked by curiosity, the woman backed off and decided to wait to see this unpredictable candidate's final move. Shock took over the men's restroom. 2 guys inside nearly fell over when a feminine figure stepped out of one of the stalls. The surprise was so ridiculous that one of them dropped his cigarette straight from his mouth. The new candidate marched directly toward the boss. Using a soft, completely transformed voice, the disguised consultant made it clear that gender wouldn't be an obstacle and that the job would get done one way or another. The master move worked, and the executive bought the idea instantly. Payment became the fake specialist's first target. She quickly guaranteed he'd have nothing to worry about financially. Soon after, the pair arrived at company headquarters. The guy, now fully immersed in character, could hardly believe his luck stepping into that massive corporate empire. The woman's power inside the company was absolute. Employees instantly cleared the way and treated her with the highest level of respect. Blown away by the boss's influence and money, he couldn't stop wondering how someone so intimidating kept failing with men. Cutting through the speculation, she revealed who she really was: Li Sao, the president of the entire corporation. Without wasting time, she pulled out a confidential contract and ordered the newcomer to sign it to discover his real role. The guy didn't hesitate for a second, his eyes glued to the astronomical bonuses listed on the paper. The real mission finally came to light. The job involved orchestrating a strategic fake marriage between 2 mega corporations. The main goal was to ensure that, within 2 years, Li Sao would commit to one of 3 heirs from an allied family, turning the search for love into a billion-dollar business deal. There was one problem, though. Li Sao's daughter was not what she seemed. Despite her status, she needed a complete transformation to become a refined, admirable lady within just 2 years. The guy thought the deadline sounded generous, but greed got the better of him. Seeing an opportunity to maximize his earnings, he hesitated, pretending he needed more time to think over the offer. Li Sao wasn't buying it. She tossed a stack of cash onto the table as an advance payment, making it clear the rest would only come after the mission succeeded. The greed in the guy's eyes was obvious, but he still tried to drag things out, keeping suspense around his final answer. In the end, the weight of fortune won out. He accepted the challenge, already imagining the luxury life waiting for him. Not long after, the newly hired consultant arrived at the heiress's house, mentally calling her his gold mine. After getting no response from knocking, he used the key Li Sao had given him and stepped inside. The house was drowned in complete silence. He called out for Lisa, but only emptiness answered back. Determined to scope the place out, he moved down the hallway. That was when bad luck hit. His foot got tangled in a pile of clothes scattered across the floor. Losing balance was unavoidable. He stumbled hard and crashed face first into a massive pile of junk blocking the entrance, turning his dramatic arrival into a total disaster. Trapped in that mountain of clutter, the consultant struggled to free himself while shouting into the darkness. Panic started creeping in when he spotted a pair of glowing eyes in the shadows. As the figure moved, he jumped back, ready to face some wild beast, only to come face to face with a black cat. The animal simply stared at him with total indifference, as if mocking the complete chaos of the place. The scene was unbelievable. The place looked more like a dump than a house. Guided by instinct and the sound of coughing coming from deeper inside, he walked toward a bedroom and slowly cracked the door open to investigate. The sight waiting through the crack in the door nearly stopped his heart. A massive, horrifying zombie figure on the TV screen seemed to be staring directly at him. The initial shock faded when he noticed Lisa sitting right below it. She was completely absorbed in a video game marathon, surrounded by a sea of soda cans and snack wrappers. The guy tried to keep his composure and explain that he had been sent by Lisao for the so-called transformation mission, but the reaction was immediate. A game over notification flashed across the screen, and Lisa shot to her feet. She walked toward him, gripping a knife with the kind of firmness that suggested she wasn't about to offer him a snack. Her bangs covered most of her face, hiding any emotion. But the seriousness in her expression was downright terrifying. The dream of easy money suddenly started looking like a dangerous nightmare. He didn't waste a second. Spinning on his heels, he bolted out of the room and slammed the door shut behind him. His mind raced at full speed, convinced that this girl was a hopeless case. The whole turning a princess around plan had become a nightmare, and the only thing he cared about now was staying alive. As he ran away, he felt completely betrayed. Lisao had promised a sweet, shy girl, someone who only struggled with social anxiety, but reality turned out to be a sharp knife and a chaotic disaster zone. Little did he know, it had all been part of the plan. Cold and calculating, Lisao had specifically chosen a man in disguise because she believed someone desperate enough for money would be easier to manipulate and control. He only stopped once his lungs started burning, hiding behind a tree to catch his breath. Grateful to have escaped that madhouse alive, his relief didn't last long. Before he could fully collect himself, a group of men in suits appeared out of nowhere, surrounding him in a tight circle. Every escape route was sealed. Suddenly, Lisa appeared behind the bodyguards, carrying the same dark, intimidating presence. The bruisers demanded to know where he thought he was going. Trembling, the guy immediately changed his tune, swearing he would never abandon the job. But the boss wasn't buying it. She pulled out the document he had signed, holding the contract right up to his face. With the smile of someone who held all the power, she asked if he had any idea what that paper actually meant. There was no escape. The contract was final. The contract wasn't just paperwork. It was a sentence. Lisao recited the clauses with a cold smile. Failing to follow orders would cost 500,000 yuan, while quitting on his own would trigger an impossible 1 million yuan penalty. The guy exploded, accusing her of lying and insisting he had read every line before signing. She didn't argue. Instead, she simply moved the paper closer to his face and pointed to microscopic text that was practically invisible to the naked eye. There it was, the trap. As he protested that no one could possibly have noticed that, Lisao gave him a light but firm slap and warned him that this was only the beginning. He had no idea how many other violations the contract allowed. The guy shouted that the whole thing was a scam, a shameless setup. Lisao ignored the outrage, invaded his personal space, and delivered the final threat. If anything happened to her daughter, he wouldn't even get the luxury of a funeral, because there wouldn't be anything left to identify. Reality hit him like a freight train. With no way out and surrounded by thugs, he was grabbed by the shoulders. Lisao made it crystal clear that she would be watching everything. Every step, every bit of progress, every mistake. Trapped in that web, he felt the crushing weight of contractual slavery. Even in the middle of the chaos, survival instincts kicked in. Panic gave way to cold strategy. He knew he would somehow figure things out, no matter how difficult it got. The only immediate problem was biological. His stomach let out a thunderous growl, reminding him that in the madness of this new life, he hadn't eaten a single thing all day. With hunger hitting hard, the guy came up with an idea. If the way to someone's heart starts through their stomach, then this was his best shot at redemption. Back in that neglected house, he headed straight for the kitchen. Digging through whatever was left in the cabinets, he somehow managed to prepare a meal worthy of a feast, focusing on flavors that might help break the ice with Lisa. He marched to her room, carefully balancing the plate. Knocking on the door, he asked for permission to enter. Inside, he found the girl still glued to her video game, acting like he didn't even exist. Staying calm, He explained that since the fridge was empty, he had made do with whatever he could find. He handed over the food as a late-night snack, sat across from her, and this time introduced himself properly with a forced smile, trying to project at least a little confidence. He explained that he would be staying around temporarily, sent by her mother, and cautiously asked for a truce, hoping maybe they could become friends. Lisa didn't even blink. The silence was heavy and absolute. Feeling awkward, he worried she might think the food had been tampered with. To prove he meant no harm, he pulled out a spoon, took a bite right in front of her, and assured her there was no poison in it. Lisa remained completely unfazed, as though he were nothing more than a shadow in the room. He tried one more time, saying he was available for anything she needed, and started backing toward the door. But bad luck followed him to the very last second. Taking a step back, he landed squarely on the cat's tail. The animal instantly hissed and glared at him with furious eyes. The guy froze in fear, bracing for an attack. His heart pounded, but luckily for him, the cat seemed satisfied with his silent apology, relaxed its fur, and spared him from ending the night in yet another physical disaster. The cat's reaction turned into an instant trigger. The moment it started meowing, Lisa changed completely. Her cold expression melted into a warm, genuine smile directed entirely at the animal. The guy stood frozen, watching that brief glimpse of humanity. But the truce didn't last long. The second her eyes returned to him, the warmth vanished, replaced by the same cold, cutting expression that practically kicked him out of the room without a single word. He hurried out, once again reminding her to eat, and making himself available if she needed anything. Lisa followed his every step into the hallway, making sure he had actually left before shutting the door. Only then, with her guard lowered, did she pick up the spoon he had left behind. She hesitated, but hunger and curiosity won out. One bite was enough. The food was incredible, warm enough to soften even that frozen heart. That night, the consultant wrote down his first discoveries in his journal. Lisa was a mystery, but she clearly had two weaknesses: cats and good food. The next morning came abruptly. His phone exploded with an ear-piercing ringtone, practically launching him out of bed. It was Lisao. Without even pretending to be polite, the boss cornered him immediately, demanding to know why he still wasn't up at 6 in the morning. Half asleep and annoyed by the audacity of the call, the guy barely had time to complain before her answer came in the form of a thinly veiled threat about his paycheck. Without giving him room to argue, she dropped a bombshell. There was one crucial detail he had completely overlooked the day before. The family's young master was returning from overseas, and worse, a close ally wanted to meet Lisa in person. The guy barely had time to process the information before she kept piling on new orders. The deadline sounded like a nightmare. The meeting with Conan was scheduled for the beginning of the following month. The guy tried to reason with Lisao, explaining that there was nowhere near enough time to pull off such a transformation. But she acted as if she were mocking his panic, completely detached from how serious the situation actually was. Frustrated by the boss's arrogance and disconnect from reality, he realized arguing was pointless. Determined, he set the goal for the day: turn that garbage dump into a livable home. The strategy was simple. Clean, bright surroundings would be the first step toward pulling Lisa out of isolation. Regretting not starting sooner, and mentally calculating how much more money he could already be making if he had moved faster, he wasted no time. Under the suspicious stare of the cat, the guy suited up for hard labor and threw open the windows, letting sunlight sweep away the house's suffocating darkness. The plan was relentless. He swept up layers of forgotten dust, tossed out piles of junk, and organized a full-blown laundry operation to deal with the mountain of filthy clothes. Hours later, the place looked completely different. The floors sparkled, and the air finally felt fresh again. Exhausted but victorious, the guy felt a huge sense of relief looking around at the spotless house. Without paying attention to where he was dropping himself, he collapsed onto the couch to celebrate the end of the cleaning spree. The problem? He landed with his full weight directly on top of the cat, which was absolutely not okay with that invasion of personal space. The cat showed zero mercy. In an explosive feline reaction, it sank its claws straight into the guy's face, kicking off a full-blown wrestling match that echoed through every room in the house. The sound of scratches and furious growls got so loud that Lisa couldn't ignore it anymore. When she finally stepped out of her room, the scene was ridiculous. The guy was clutching the cat while it fought to break free. The moment the cat spotted its owner, it escaped and jumped straight into her arms. To the guy's surprise, Lisa used the cat like a mask, covering her eyes with its body to shield herself from the brightness of the house, now flooded with sunlight. She stumbled blindly down the hallway, bumping into furniture as she went. The guy tried stepping in, advising her to face the light, but she ignored him completely and shoved past him with a sharp shoulder bump. Not a single word came out of her mouth. The silence remained absolute. Still, he refused to give up, announcing that he would make breakfast and that, starting today, things were going to be different. Minutes later, he showed up at her bedroom door carrying a freshly made plate. Lisa simply pointed toward the door, silently signaling for him to disappear, but the guy stood his ground. He introduced a new rule. She needed to leave that cave and eat in the kitchen like a normal person. Lisa turned her head away, making her contempt painfully obvious, but the guy kept pushing, describing every detail of the smell and appearance of the feast, trying to hook her curiosity through her stomach. The guy grabbed a spoon and tasted the breakfast right in front of her, putting on an exaggerated show of satisfaction and praising how incredible it was. Lisa watched the whole thing, clearly tempted, but her pride kept her rooted in the darkness of the room. Realizing her stubbornness had won for now, he finally backed off and returned to the kitchen, feeling the deadline closing in on him. He needed a better strategy to pull her out of hiding for good. His thoughts were interrupted by a subtle movement. Suddenly, a pale hand stretched out from the hallway, reached toward the table, and snatched the plate of food with animal-like speed. The guy could barely hide the excitement in his eyes. That tiny victory meant something, but the celebration lasted only seconds. The moment she grabbed the food, Lisa sprinted back to her room and locked herself inside again. He knew things were still far from ideal, but for the first time, there was finally a crack in the wall. Meanwhile, elsewhere, director John and Anso were busy discussing serious business. Anso tried dodging the conversation, arguing that as nothing more than a student, he shouldn't be involved in the family's corporate affairs. Jean, however, kept insisting on the young man's potential, talking about the company as if it already belonged to him and enthusiastically bringing up the upcoming wedding ceremony. Genuinely confused, Anso assumed it had to be some kind of bad joke, since marriage had never even crossed his mind. The tension rose when John bluntly asked whether he really didn't know about his engagement to the daughter of the Lycee Corporation's owner. The shock on the young man's face was real. John, meanwhile, was convinced the kid was only pretending not to know, insisting that news of the marriage had already spread to everyone. The news exploded across the media, completely blindsiding Anso. He quickly checked his phone, confirming the rumors were real. The company's plan was obvious: merge their empires through marriage. Although caught off guard, Anso didn't think the arrangement sounded all that bad. Deep down, he hoped the heiress would turn out to be some elegant princess, which would make everything a whole lot easier. Meanwhile, during a tense conversation, Lisao questioned the consultant about why he needed to hire a housekeeper. Sensing danger, he spread his arms and tried to explain with all the diplomacy he could manage. He needed help if the plan was going to succeed. Lisao, dripping with sarcasm, suggested he was just being lazy and asked whether the paycheck wasn't good enough for him to clean up the mess himself. The guy refused to back down. He explained that the issue wasn't money, it was the scale of the disaster. Lisa lived in non-stop chaos, which meant deep cleaning every other day, constant meals, and dealing with the cat's mess. Lisao lost her patience, grabbed his face tightly, and snapped that those were his basic responsibilities. He pulled away, wincing in pain and frustration, and doubled down, reminding her that time was the one thing they couldn't afford to waste. Seeing how serious he was, the boss paused to think. Realizing he had a point, she finally started considering the request. Sensing hesitation, the consultant immediately pressed harder, hammering home the deadly deadlines hanging over them. Lisao finally gave in and ordered him to find a housekeeper. Just as he was about to run off and solve the problem, she stopped him, reminding him that since he was still a student himself, he'd also have to balance school with Lisa's transformation schedule. With a touch of maternal authority, she assured him everything would be arranged. Lisao sealed the guy's fate. He would study alongside her daughter to make supervision easier. With a sharp spin of her chair, she ended the conversation and ordered him out. The consultant, still hesitating, tried bringing up insurance, but was immediately dismissed. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Anso arrived with his assistant, keeping his visit a complete secret despite his father's orders. Their investigation into the Lee family had been a total failure. No records, no photos, nothing. Trying to lift his boss's spirits, the assistant painted an idealized picture of the heiress, refined, kind, and noble-hearted. Caught up in the fantasy, Anso decided to stay in the car scrolling through the internet while the assistant headed to the hotel. That was when he stumbled across a job posting that froze him in place, a housekeeper position for the heiress's home. The plan changed instantly. "Forget the hotel," he ordered. telling the driver to head straight to the address in the listing. The meeting happened immediately. The man applying for the position, using the name Hanyan, looked like he had stepped out of a luxury catalog, a custom-tailored suit, a gold watch, and the posture of someone who had probably never washed a single dish in his life. Even though Zhu Yuan was surprised by the guy's ridiculously polished appearance, he was desperate for help and ignored the obvious mismatch. He seriously listed the responsibilities: cooking, heavy cleaning, bathrooms, and taking care of the cat. Hanyan didn't hesitate for a second and accepted everything. When the consultant introduced the mandatory insurance clause, he simply sighed, convinced he was dealing with yet another spoiled rich kid pretending to experience ordinary life. For Zhu Yuan, the guy's motivation didn't matter. He just needed someone willing to share the chaos. The deal was sealed with a handshake. Without hesitation, Zhu Yuan welcomed the new employee, and the two headed straight to Lisa's house. Ansi stayed optimistic, still hoping to meet the angelic figure his assistant had described. The moment the door opened, Zhu Yuan gave him a warning. Prepare yourself not to have a heart attack. The kitchen scene was bleak. Lisa sat there swallowed by shadows, her hair hanging over her face like a thick curtain. The second sunlight poured in through the open door. She reacted like a nocturnal animal, shielding her eyes with her hands before retreating back to her room. Ansi froze in horror. Completely confused, he asked who that woman was, assuming she had to be some kind of teacher. Zhu Yuan's answer hit like a bucket of ice water. That was the Li Corporation heiress. Reality crashed into Ansi hard. The princess he had imagined looked more like a living corpse. His assistant's glowing praise about her noble spirit now sounded like the worst joke imaginable. Ignoring the guy's stunned silence, Zhu Yuan tossed an apron at him and ordered him to get to work. Dinner wasn't going to cook itself. Meanwhile, Ansi, still stiff as a statue, tried figuring himself out in front of the stove while Zhu Yuan relaxed at the table, scrolling on his phone without a hint of guilt. Still trying to process the absurdity of everything, Ansi brought up the arranged marriage, asking whether it was nothing more than an exaggerated rumor. Zhu Yuan coldly confirmed the news. It was real and official. That was why their mission wasn't just washing dishes or cleaning up after the cat. They somehow had to transform that creature of darkness into a proper lady before time ran out. Zhu Yuan wasted no time assigning a new responsibility, taking care of little Lisu. With a confident grin, he declared that the two of them would be responsible for turning the girl into a true lady. Noticing the new employee had already eaten, he headed toward the child's room. Without ceremony, Zhu Yuan tried luring Lisu out with food, relying on the same tricks as always. But the girl came prepared and refused to fall for it. In one swift move, he snatched the plate from the guy's hands, watching the whole thing unfold with amusement as the girl once again came out on top. Frustrated, the employee could only wonder how anyone was supposed to handle such a complicated situation. Ansi's goal was crystal clear: get out of that place as fast as possible. When Gu Yuan suggested they sit down and eat together, the mood instantly turned tense. In a firm, determined tone, Ansi announced that he needed to discuss something serious. He placed the contract on the table. Adjusting his glasses, Gu Yuan immediately realized the guy wanted out of the deal and intended to quit. Ansi confirmed it without hesitation, admitting that the environment wasn't for him and confessing that Lisu genuinely scared him. More than anything, he wanted to escape that house and any possibility of an arranged marriage. Gu Yuan pushed back, telling him to reread the contract carefully. Thinking it was nothing more than a standard cancellation fee, Ansi confidently insisted he could handle any financial penalty. Yuan then questioned whether he had considered the impact this could have on his reputation. That was when Ansi realized his real name wasn't even listed on the paperwork, making it obvious he wasn't remotely worried about the consequences of quitting. Seeing how determined he was, Yuan stood up and proposed an immediate destination: the headquarters of Easy Corporation. Ansi figured he would settle everything face-to-face with the director, but Yuan quickly corrected him in an icy tone. The contract belonged to her, had been written by her own hand, and required a specific signature for any kind of termination. The warning came sharp and clear. Challenging someone with Lisu's level of power was a fatal mistake. In Ansi's mind, the office scenario became pure nightmare fuel. He imagined the director's fury the second she heard about his sudden resignation. In his head, disaster unfolded step by step. Lisu would order a ruthless investigation into his background and quickly discover he was actually the young master of the An family. The predictable ending. His own father begging Lisu for forgiveness for raising such a disappointing son, practically handing him over as an apology gift to lock in a forced marriage on the spot. The thought of an immediate marriage, arranged through family pressure and fear, hit him like lightning. Exhausted and cornered, Ansi finally gave in and agreed to stay, earning an ironic compliment from Yuan, who encouraged him to devote himself even harder to his new routine. Defeated, the employee returned to his room. The moment he dropped onto the bed, fear of Lisu consumed him. She inspired nothing but dread. In the silence of the room, he tried imagining a life far away from that suffocating atmosphere, somewhere he could finally breathe without the weight of unwanted obligations. Somewhere between exhaustion and anxiety, sleep eventually took over, offering him a temporary escape while he subconsciously planned what felt like his only real option, running away for good. The idea of escaping in the middle of the night quickly took root in Ansi's mind, seeming like the only logical way out. With the house swallowed by darkness and complete silence hanging in the air, he peeked through the window, carefully planning every step toward freedom. Moving like a ghost, he crossed the room, but the sound of a creak froze him in place before he could even reach the hallway. Unfortunately for him, Lisu was standing in the kitchen by the fridge. Eye contact was unavoidable, and the guy stopped dead in his tracks, feeling his entire plan collapse while she simply kept eating, completely indifferent. Ignoring the tension, he resumed moving, focusing only on the front door. His hand touched the doorknob, success almost within reach, until heavy footsteps coming from Gu Yuan's room shattered the silence. The house lights suddenly flicked on all at once, exposing the runaway in the act. Gu Yuan appeared, sarcastically asking what all the noise was about. The scene was complete chaos. A frustrated Lisu was desperately trying to open her bedroom door, now locked shut, while Gu Yuan watched the guy's humiliation with clear satisfaction. Sitting down on the couch, Yuan didn't hold back the mockery. The escape attempt hadn't even lasted 24 hours, exactly what he had expected. To make sure the lesson stuck, he revealed that the house alarm had been activated, making sneaking out impossible. In an act of pure trolling, he dangled the bedroom key right in front of Lisu, practically daring her to take it back. The move hit hard. For a girl who hated being left alone, the moment felt like total collapse, as though her entire world had just fallen apart. The atmosphere in the living room practically screamed victory for Gu Yuan, who sat there watching both defeated young men, one crushed by a failed escape attempt, the other powerless in front of a locked door. With obvious amusement, he invited Ansi to sit beside him and face reality. There was no way out, and the employee had no choice but to obey, sitting through criticism about his disappointing behavior. Gu Yuan didn't stop there, constantly reminding him about the importance of teamwork. The director held compromising records over Ansi, and the unspoken threat that his life could be ruined was the chain keeping him trapped there. Meanwhile, the sound of Lisu unsuccessfully trying to open her bedroom door echoed in the background. The mentor made one thing painfully clear. Inside that house, the girl's wishes ruled everything. She held absolute power over the rules. Then, the silence finally broke. With a trembling voice, Lisu managed to speak, directly demanding that the guys leave. The immediate reaction was total shock, not because she wanted them gone, but because she had actually spoken again. Gu Yuan, visibly emotional, saw it as unexpected and meaningful progress. Quickly, he explained that both of them were under contract, and leaving simply wasn't an option. Faced with rejection, Lisu changed her request, desperately begging them to at least unlock her bedroom door so she could regain a little privacy and control over her safe space. Committed to honoring the girl's wishes, the guy agreed to unlock the door, but not without setting one condition first. Starting the following week, they would begin a shared study routine. To Lisu's horror, Gu Yuan confirmed he would also be joining the classes, but before opening the door, he decided to raise the tension even further. Walking over to the shelf, he picked up one of the rarest and most expensive figurines in the girl's collection. With careful precision, he pulled out a knife and pressed the blade against the collectible's neck. The threat came cold and direct. If she refused to study, the doll's head would be chopped off right there. Lisu panicked instantly, begging for the figurine to be spared, while Ansi stood frozen, barely able to process the sheer audacity of that emotional blackmail. Without leaving room for argument, the situation suddenly took a bizarre turn. Gu Yuan, now fully focused on business, pulled up a lipstick advertisement and started pitching makeup products with unsettling confidence. He ordered Ansi to begin selecting shades and makeup colors, completely ignoring any sign of resistance. The guy tried questioning where this authority was coming from, but was immediately shut down. Under Gu Yuan's firm command, the table was flooded with cosmetics, and the forced labor of testing textures and colors began, leaving Ansi furious over how absurd the day had become. Gyu Yuan organized the cosmetics with obsessive perfectionism, treating Li Su's preparation like they were building a runway star from scratch. The vision was obvious. She needed to be sculpted into an elite young lady, someone who looked nothing like ordinary students. Ansi tried offering input, but he could barely hide his discomfort after being turned into a human test dummy for every product, his face completely covered in makeup swatches. He argued that if they really wanted to transform the girl, they needed to focus on clothing and give her hair the treatment it desperately needed. When Gyu Yuan attempted to untangle Li Su's hopelessly messy hair, he was anything but gentle. The comb tore through her hair with brutal force, pulling out cries of pain and desperate pleas from the girl. Unable to stomach the cruelty of the scene, Ansi looked away. But Li Su's distress attracted an unexpected ally. The black cat suddenly launched itself straight at Gyu Yuan's face. The impact sent him crashing to the floor. The opening was perfect. Li Su slipped free in an instant, sprinted down the hallway and locked herself inside her room. Furious, Gyu Yuan wiped blood from his face and swore her submission was only a matter of time. He and Ansi approached the door, checking whether it had actually been locked. When they forced their way inside, the room was empty. Panic hit Ansi immediately. Terrified, she might have jumped out the window, but Gyu Yuan simply shrugged, reminding him they were on the ground floor. Escape was pointless, he assured him. Since the entire property was covered by alarms and the plan to keep the girl under total control remained perfectly intact, the security system sealed off every escape route through the windows. The tension in the room was suddenly interrupted by a faint creaking sound coming from the wardrobe. Gyu Yuan spotted the slightly open door and tried pulling it open, but Li Su was pressing back from the inside, holding it shut with all her strength. Out of patience for hide-and-seek, he got straight to the point. Resisting was pointless. He offered a blunt truce, warning that she couldn't live locked inside a closet forever. While the negotiation dragged on, Ansi suddenly froze. A chill ran down his spine as he remembered exactly what he had left inside that wardrobe. A mountain of filthy clothes piled up on the highest shelf. In complete panic, he begged them not to open the door under any circumstances. Too late. A heavy gasp escaped through the crack before Li Su suddenly collapsed onto the floor, completely unconscious. The reason for the ridiculous knockout sat right on top of her. Ansi's pile of dirty laundry had crashed down onto her head. The smell was so unbearable that the girl instantly passed out. Gyu Yuan understood the disaster immediately. Throwing a judgmental look at Ansi, he bluntly declared that his co-worker's radioactive-level filth was the true culprit behind the girl practically suffocating. While criticizing the guy's hygiene, he crouched down and lightly slapped Li Su's cheeks, trying to wake her up. After a few tense moments, she finally reacted, slowly opening her eyes, only to find Gyu Yuan's serious expression hovering right above her. Gyu Yuan celebrated the girl waking up, holding her in his arms until she fully regained awareness. The reaction, however, was brutal. Rejecting any attempt at care, Li Su landed a solid punch directly across his face. The hit was strong enough to send him crashing to the floor. Taking advantage of the opening, the girl darted to the darkest corner of the room. Furious, Gyu Yuan got back to his feet, shouting that he had only wanted to get her off the cold floor and accusing her of being incapable of appreciating kindness. Cornered, she simply demanded to be left alone, but the guy wasn't backing off. Standing over her in an intimidating stance, he declared his patience officially over and promised severe retaliation. The threat was precise. Every single one of her bank accounts would be frozen immediately. To make the hit land harder, Gyu Yuan dragged Ansi into the plan. Loudly, he began listing the biggest upcoming video game releases and exclusive collector's editions scheduled for the next few weeks. Catching on instantly, Ansi confirmed every must-have release. The message couldn't have been clearer. No money meant saying goodbye to every luxury she loved. Despite the heavy blackmail, Li Su stayed completely expressionless, refusing to cooperate. Realizing her stubbornness was stronger than expected and that the pressure wasn't working, Gyu Yuan finally gave up. He signaled to his partner, deciding their only option left was to leave the girl there and walk away. That financial threat hit exactly where it hurt. Just before the pair reached the exit, the girl's voice suddenly cut through the room, stopping them in their tracks. Her detached attitude vanished instantly. Even with her messy hair hanging everywhere, she fixed them with a determined look and accepted the deal. She would behave and focus on studying. Shock took over both guys. The sense of victory was so overwhelming that Gyu Yuan almost looked ready to cry with relief. When he saw the girl running toward them with her arms raised, the mentor braced himself for an emotional hug. Sweet illusion. Without slowing down, she bulldozed straight through both of them with a violent shove and threw open the door. Gu Yuan's celebration died on the spot, as he realized he had celebrated way too early. Li Su immediately ran to the darkest corner of the room again, curling up and avoiding all contact. Panic quickly took over. With her social anxiety hitting hard, her mind spiraled into nightmare scenarios, imagining humiliation, mockery, and cruel jokes waiting for her from future classmates. Trying to shake off the spiraling paranoia, Li Su suddenly found herself face to face with a mirror. The reflection hit like a bucket of cold water. Seeing herself in such a miserable state crushed what little confidence she had left, making her feel like absolute trash. The self-pity didn't last long, though. Gu Yuan's commanding voice echoed from outside, calling her out of the shadows and demanding that she finally face reality. Trying to ease the pressure, Gu Yuan reassured her that she would have full support with her studies. Against all odds, she finally stepped out of her room. The atmosphere immediately turned tense when she appeared in silence, tightly gripping a pair of scissors while staring directly at the two guys. The shock faded quickly. Gu Yuan instantly understood the message, took the scissors, and volunteered himself for the mission of cutting her hair. With the girl seated, he carefully worked through her hair until he reached her bangs. At that moment, eye contact became unavoidable, and the depth in her gaze left him frozen for a few seconds under Ansie's watchful stare. The problem came with the final result: complete disaster. The moment Gu Yuan realized the haircut looked terrible, panic immediately hit him. He rushed to apologize, bracing himself for the girl's fury. Without saying a word, Li Su fled in horror straight into Ansie's room. Irritated, the guy demanded his personal space back, only to get shut down and banished to the living room couch instead. Away from everyone else, Li Su stared into the mirror. Running her fingers across her face, she searched desperately for some kind of miracle from any angle, but there was no saving it. The haircut was awful. The nightmare dragged into the next morning, when daylight slowly began pulling Ansie out of his uncomfortable sleep. Ansie's wake-up call came with the sound of heavy breathing right beside him. The second he opened his eyes, he nearly had a heart attack. The black cat was sitting comfortably on top of his blanket. Panicking, he launched himself to the opposite side of the couch, trembling from the scare. Meanwhile, Gu Yuan was already overflowing with energy. Halfway through breakfast, he hurried his partner along, reminding him there was no time to waste. The study routine officially started today. Determined not to accept excuses, Gu Yuan marched to Li Su's room to collect on her promise, making it crystal clear that backing out at the last second wasn't an option. Too impatient to wait for an answer, he swung the door wide open, then froze. The girl stood motionless in front of the window, her back facing the entrance, completely dressed in black from head to toe. The trio's arrival at school immediately turned heads. Ansie carried himself with confidence and an easy smile, while Gu Yuan looked practically radiant just from succeeding in dragging the girl out of the house. The female students instantly lost their minds over the pair. Whispers spread through the hallways, comparing them to celebrities, while Gu Yuan was quickly recognized as the handsome finance major everyone already knew. But the excitement died quickly when people noticed the bizarre figure trailing behind them. Completely swallowed by social anxiety, Li Su tried disguising herself with dark clothes, a face mask, and oversized glasses. The result was the exact opposite of blending in. She looked like some kind of ghost haunting the hallways, instantly becoming the center of attention. Once inside the classroom, the two guys shared a desk while the girl curled into herself and practically disappeared into the environment, an isolation Gu Yuan chose to ignore entirely. Gu Yuan felt like a tactical genius. Dragging the girl onto campus, even through manipulation, felt like the first real step toward bringing her back into the real world. His illusion of control got stronger when his pen rolled under the desk, and as he bent down to retrieve it, he discovered Li Su squeezed underneath, completely absorbed in her video game. To him, the fact that she was physically there at all counted as major progress. The bell rang, marking the end of class. That sense of accomplishment shattered fast when Ansie urgently tapped Gu Yuan on the shoulder. His partner looked tense and got straight to the point. The girl had disappeared. Gu Yuan immediately dropped to the floor in panic and looked under the desk, but the hiding spot was empty. His eyes swept frantically across the classroom, heart pounding just imagining the ruthless fury of the girl's mother coming down on them. Not giving him time to spiral, Ansie took control of the situation. The strategy was simple: split up. He would search the hallways while Gu Yuan checked the outdoor areas. While the two launched their desperate search, Li Su had already created her own little refuge beneath a lonely tree near the sports field, completely absorbed in her phone screen. That peace lasted only seconds. A group of troublemakers suddenly surrounded her in a loose circle. Their leader approached with pure mockery, teasing her for gaming alone and making it obvious he was looking for trouble. Danger alarms instantly started blaring in Lisu's mind, forcing her to size up the group and calculate her next move. The danger turned out to be an illusion. The guys weren't looking for a fight at all. They just desperately needed help clearing an impossible level in Mario. Before Lisu could even process the unexpectedly friendly request, Gyu Yuan came charging in and completely ruined the moment. Terrified that she might somehow end up in trouble on day one, he bulldozed into the conversation and ordered the group to back off immediately, leaving Lisu frozen. That interruption came with consequences. The second the group looked at Gyu Yuan, recognition hit instantly. He was the famous finance student. Even worse, he apparently owed them big time. The leader immediately cornered him, bringing up some shady life insurance scheme that had supposedly promised a fortune payout in case of death. Trapped, Gyu Yuan awkwardly played dumb, but the giant guy was already inches from his face, clearly hungry for revenge. The real disaster, however, happened in the middle of the argument. One of the troublemakers accidentally bumped Lisu's arm. Her gaming console slipped from her hands and hit the ground. Whatever patience she had left disappeared instantly. Completely cornered, Gyu Yuan tried begging for some kind of deal to save himself, but the group's clenched fists made it painfully obvious a beating was inevitable. The leader kept throwing insults at the supposed scammer, completely blind to the real danger growing behind him. Gyu Yuan's eyes widened as he desperately tried warning the guy, but it was already too late. Lisu was standing directly behind him, radiating pure murderous energy that made one thing painfully clear. Somebody was about to pay a very expensive price for dropping her game console. Lisu's presence immediately changed the atmosphere. Wrapped head to toe in dark clothes, she radiated the fury of something straight out of a nightmare. Gyu Yuan still tried stepping in to prevent a massacre, but the girl's anger had already erased any chance of negotiation. Ignoring every warning, she locked onto the only target that mattered, the guy responsible for dropping her console. With a single brutal strike, Lisu sent the giant flying through the air. On the other side of the courtyard, Ansi was living in a completely different reality. Sitting casually on a bench, he was charming a group of girls with his music knowledge, soaking up every compliment like fuel for his ego. The romantic atmosphere shattered instantly. The guy Lisu had launched came soaring across the sky like a missile and crashed violently right into Ansi's area, knocking himself unconscious on impact. While Ansi dealt with the human projectile disaster, Gyu Yuan took shelter behind a tree to witness the chaos unfold. Just Lisu's silhouette standing there with her back turned was enough to terrify the remaining troublemakers. The second she turned around with a murderous stare, panic spread through the group. Trembling uncontrollably, one of the guys rushed to hand back her gaming console, practically swearing on his life that the device was completely unharmed. Focused only on resuming her game, Lisu quickly grabbed the console back, but her return to peace didn't last. That ridiculous knockout had not gone unnoticed around campus. A crowd of students had already gathered, completely shocked and openly admiring the raw strength of the mysterious girl. Beating up the bullies came with a heavy price. The entire campus spotlight suddenly turned toward Lisu. Completely unable to handle the suffocating attention from dozens of curious students because of her social anxiety, panic overwhelmed her. Right there in the middle of the courtyard, the girl simply passed out. While confused students crowded around her, Gyu Yuan forced his way through the crowd, scattered the onlookers, and rushed her to the infirmary. Once Lisu was finally lying on the medical bed, reality hit Gyu Yuan hard. If the girl was exhausted enough to collapse like that, the condition of the guys she had beaten up must have been terrifying. A cold sweat ran down his spine as he remembered every time he had manipulated her over the past few days, silently thanking fate that he was somehow still alive. Far away, Ansi slowly regained consciousness after being accidentally crushed by the airborne bully. The moment he overheard whispers about a massacre behind the gym, he immediately figured out exactly who had caused it. By the next day, the gossip had already transformed into full-blown campus legend. Gyu Yuan stared at the school newspaper in disbelief, reading an absurdly dramatic headline about a mysterious fighter who had wiped out an army of delinquents before vanishing into the sunset like an anonymous hero. He turned to Ansi and questioned who could possibly have written something so ridiculously exaggerated. Before Ansi could reveal the truth behind the article, the mood suddenly turned heavy. The door burst open, and the same bruised-up troublemakers from the day before stormed in, scanning the room for someone. Panic instantly locked Gyu Yuan in place. He was convinced the gang had come back to settle the score and finally finish him off. Fully convinced his life was over, Gyu Yuan stepped forward and nervously confronted the group, demanding to know how they had found the place. The response was pure disrespect. The guys shoved him aside like he didn't even exist and marched inside with a very specific target in mind. The girl quietly focused on her video game. The leader's shadow loomed over Lisu. The second she looked up and saw the same giant she had beaten down earlier, now with his face completely wrecked, she immediately started trembling in fear. Gu Yuan quickly tried stepping in, suggesting they settle things peacefully to protect her, but his words fell on deaf ears. The gang's attention was locked entirely on her. Then everything took a bizarre turn. Instead of revenge and destruction, the leader suddenly lowered his head, bowed deeply in front of Lisu, and begged to become her underling. The scene left both Ansi and Gu Yuan completely speechless, bracing for disaster. One by one, the entire squad of former troublemakers repeated the gesture, showing absolute loyalty to a totally confused and stunned Lisu. Acting like an overly devoted servant, the leader crossed every line of personal space and started massaging the girl's shoulders, offering her rest if gaming had made her tired. Furious at the audacity, Gu Yuan immediately tried charging in to pull them away from his protege. The rescue mission failed instantly. A human wall stepped in front of him, blocking the path while mockingly informing him that from now on, any meeting with Boss Lee required prior scheduling. Watching the madness unfold, Ansi realized immediately that the entire social hierarchy had just flipped upside down. Later that night, Gu Yuan's inner opportunist took over. Sensing a golden business opportunity in this strange new dynamic, he shamelessly started buttering up Lisu. He practically begged her to use her newfound influence and convince her followers to hire him for their business ventures. Meanwhile, boredom filled the room as Lisu completely ignored the chaos surrounding her new personal gang. The former bullies, now loyal followers, gathered around her in admiration, fascinated by her gaming skills. Determined to be useful, the leader rallied the group. Everyone pulled out their own consoles, ready to assist Boss Lee with clearing any challenge in the game. Lisu, however, looked completely uninterested. Without saying a single word, she stood up, put away her console, and quietly headed toward the bathroom with a distant expression. When one of the followers tried to intervene, Gu Yuan stopped him, explaining that she simply needed privacy. The leader wasted no time organizing a formal escort, having his men clear a path through the hallway, while loudly shouting for everyone to make way for their protected boss. The entire situation felt surreal and terrifying to Lisu. The pressure of being followed by a makeshift squad of bodyguards made her legs shaky and her breathing uneven, every step feeling like a forced march beneath countless curious stares. Ever the loyal servant, the leader even had the audacity to wish her good luck, as if she were a queen departing on an important royal mission. Watching the level of collective insanity from those vandals, Gu Yuan finally lost his patience and confronted them, demanding to know why they were acting so devoted over nothing more than a video game match. The leader, suddenly wearing a dark expression and completely ignoring Gu Yuan's sarcasm, brushed off the question and shifted focus. What exactly did the girl want so badly? Tired of the whole circus, Gu Yuan answered with pure disdain, explaining that Lisu was simply in a terrible mood because of the disastrous haircut she had ended up with. Still wearing his signature hat, Gu Yuan tried giving his opinion on the girl's appearance, but was immediately cut off by the giant troublemaker, who had already grabbed a pair of scissors. Gu Yuan barely had time to question whether the guy actually knew what he was doing before the job was already finished. The new haircut looked flawless, dramatically enhancing Lisu's features. Gu Yuan stood there completely baffled, trying to process how some random delinquent had such absurd talent with scissors. Trying to maintain the image of a master stylist, the guy casually started mentioning a peculiar last name before getting interrupted halfway through. Gu Yuan suddenly pointed at him and confidently declared that his name had to be Tony. The accuracy of the guess left the guy speechless, while Gu Yuan's only explanation was a vague gesture toward the ceiling, as if divine revelation had personally delivered the answer. Once the visitors finally left, calm returned to the room. Ansi and Gu Yuan collapsed against the table, completely exhausted, while Lisu stayed focused on her game as if nothing unusual had happened. Ansi openly complained about how studying was draining his soul. In the middle of the conversation, Gu Yuan suddenly had a greedy flash of inspiration. Leaning closer to Lisu, he shamelessly asked for a favor, suggesting she use her influence over Tony to convince him to sign up for an insurance plan. The other Gu Yuan, already fed up with the non-stop business obsession, told him to knock it off, but was completely ignored. The self-proclaimed mastermind insisted his business would explode in success next month. The conversation was suddenly cut short by an urgent memory hitting Gu Yuan like a truck. the warning that an influential ally of Mr. An would be arriving soon to personally meet the girl. Gu Yuan shot to his feet so fast that he accidentally knocked Ansi out of his chair without the slightest concern. Still groggy and confused, Ansi could only ask who exactly this mysterious guest was supposed to be. Consumed by anxiety, Gu Yuan paced back and forth across the room, replaying every recent disaster in his head, while Ansi unsuccessfully tried figuring out what breakdown his partner was currently having. Across the city, Zhu Tankin checked his reflection in the mirror of a car after finishing a performance, thinking about the mission waiting for him next month, temporarily stepping in for his friend Tian Qin. He admitted to the driver that he personally needed to investigate the messy romantic situation surrounding Ansi, thoroughly annoying the poor employee with all the non-stop talking. Tankin stayed glued to his phone, fascinated by whatever he was seeing. While miles away, Ansi kept sneezing repeatedly, somehow convinced his friend was talking about him, and already seeing this upcoming visit as the perfect excuse to completely destroy the arranged marriage plans. Meanwhile, Lisu remained completely oblivious to everything, still wearing her sloppy clothes and staying focused on her console. Suddenly, an enormous shadow loomed over her. Turning her head, she found Gu Yuan standing directly above her, staring intensely at her gameplay with such an unsettling expression that the girl instantly turned pale. Startled, she reacted with perfect accuracy and smacked him hard across the cheek. Gu Yuan quickly backed away, while Ansi, already numb to his friend's endless failures, didn't even bother looking up anymore. Ignoring the slap completely, Gu Yuan dropped dramatically to his knees, devastated by how little time remained. Pointing toward Lisu, still sprawled lazily on the couch, he lamented in an almost theatrical tone that her ghost-like appearance would ruin everything. The meeting with Ansi's influential ally was fast approaching, and in her current state, the girl stood no chance of making the right impression. Still kneeling, Gu Yuan begged for mercy, desperately pleading with the girl to cooperate with a complete makeover and major attitude adjustment. Lisu, however, ignored every word and bolted straight out of the room. Frustrated, Gu Yuan redirected all his complaints at Ansi, who casually watched everything unfold with an amused grin, insisting that rushing things would only make everything worse. Gu Yuan exploded, shouting that the guest was an elite-level celebrity and that someone like Lisu would be dismissed without a second thought in that social hierarchy. He was already picturing his own downfall, convinced they wouldn't survive 30 days under Li Sao's ruthless expectations. Ansi kept up the sarcastic attitude, pretending to sympathize while clearly not caring at all. Realizing his partner was useless, Gu Yuan made a drastic decision. In the middle of the night, he grabbed Ansi by the arm and dragged him out into the streets. Minutes later, they found themselves inside a women's clothing store. Gu Yuan frantically started picking dresses and skirts that deep down, he knew Lisu would never willingly wear. Ansi simply watched with skepticism, fully aware that changing clothes wouldn't magically fix the deeper trauma the girl was carrying. At the same time, another anxiety kept growing inside him. Zhu Tankin. The guy couldn't keep secrets to save his life, and if he showed up, absolute chaos would follow. Ansi's thoughts drifted back to the principal's office, where he and Tian Qin had once been interrogated over skipping classes. Ansi desperately tried defending himself, only to get interrupted by Tian Qin's sarcastic comments mocking their flimsy excuses. The principal coldly demanded to know where the two had been. Before they could invent a convincing story, Tian Qin accidentally blurted out that, obviously, they weren't about to admit they had spent the entire day hiding online. The principal's expression darkened immediately, understanding everything at once, while Ansi realized far too late that his own friend had verbally sabotaged him. Panic hit Ansi as he imagined the consequences if Tian Qin leaked his location to his father. Sensing the fear, Tian Qin reassured him he would stay quiet, but the promise felt dangerously unreliable. He openly admitted that, once he returned, he would probably reveal Ansi's whereabouts anyway, predicting that after the initial shock, Ansi's father would bury him under corporate responsibilities and fast-track the arranged engagement Ansi had been desperately trying to escape. Meanwhile, with that ticking time bomb hanging overhead, Gu Yuan proudly held up a dress and asked whether the outfit looked worthy of celebrity approval. Impressed, the store clerk complimented his taste and explained that the piece belonged to an exclusive collection. Gu Yuan immediately requested a smaller size tailored to Lisu's proportions. Ansi walked over, agreeing that the dress would probably look amazing on the girl, but casually asked whether Gu Yuan was secretly buying a present for his girlfriend. Gu Yuan let out a heavy sigh, denying any romantic involvement. He pointed at Lisu, making it clear the goal was simply to get her ready for the event. The sales associate, caught off guard by how strange the situation was, hurried off to grab the right size. Confused, Ansi pressed his partner about what exactly he was plotting. Gu Yuan coldly explained that Lisu still lacked the proper presence for the upcoming gathering, and that he was determined to shape and protect her, or hide her away, until she was ready. Ansi thought he sounded completely insane, even if the plan happened to serve his own interest in keeping secrets buried. Still, the concern lingered. A young man and a young woman living alone together was dangerous gossip that could ruin Lisu's reputation forever, a risk Gu Yuan seemed to underestimate. Ansi realized Gu Yuan had a point. Protecting Lisu's reputation came first. The consultant returned with the outfit, but chaos broke loose when Gu Yuan, without the slightest shame, pointed at Ansi and told the girl to bring him a dress too. Ansi was completely stunned. He expected to be shoved into the basement or hidden in some corner, but never stuffed into women's clothes. The demand felt like some sadistic punishment straight from a demon. Meanwhile, outside pressure kept building through messages from Tianqin. The fiancé insisted that if Ansi rejected the arranged bride, he needed to tell his father immediately, promising to handle the wedding paperwork remotely. Feeling cornered, Ansi tossed his phone away. He would rather suffer any humiliation than embarrass himself in front of his family, but Gu Yuan's insane ideas were going way too far. After landing a perfectly aimed slap across Gu Yuan's face to shut down the ridiculous disguise idea, Ansi started piecing together a better plan. He decided the answer was not dressing up as a woman, but introducing Tianqin to a fake girlfriend so disastrous it would instantly kill any wedding plans. He pictured the moment clearly, Tianqin arriving, expecting a refined and charming bride, only to be greeted by someone who would shatter every expectation. The strategy was set. That night, beneath the absolute darkness of the silent house, the idea began taking shape, turning Ansi's panic into a weapon against his own fate. Ansi kept an eye on the living room. The mission was simple: end the engagement. The princess and her companion, who usually stepped out for a late-night snack, were nowhere to be seen, making it the perfect opportunity. He walked into the kitchen. Lisu was there, completely focused on devouring frozen food straight from the fridge. Ansi quietly crept closer, stopping right behind her. The scare was instant. He muttered a single line, and Lisu panicked, bolting out of the room. Halfway down the hall, Gu Yuan stepped out of his room carrying papers. Without noticing the fox girl, they crashed into each other hard. Papers flew everywhere as both hit the floor in a tangled mess. Desperate, Lisu grabbed onto him by reflex. Their eyes locked for a second before she scrambled over him and locked herself in her room, slamming the door behind her. Gu Yuan tried to stop her, but failed. As he pulled himself together, he noticed Ansi standing there in the middle of the living room, watching everything. The atmosphere turned tense. Trying to play it cool, Ansi awkwardly asked why Gu Yuan was still awake, and quickly headed toward the bathroom. On the way, Ansi stepped on the scattered pile of papers. Picking one up, he asked what it was about. It turned out to be an insurance ad. Gu Yuan bluntly explained it was part of a brand new strategy he had come up with to sell policies to everyone. The celebrity situation had become critical, with Papara and the group growing more aggressive, but Gu Yuan saw opportunity instead. His strategy was simple: turn the living room into an insurance billboard. He figured that under enough pressure, the guests would have no choice but to sign contracts on the spot. Ansi thought the plan was pure insanity. Sleepy and irritated, he tried to leave, but Gu Yuan blocked his path. The interrogation started immediately. The excuse about going to the bathroom did not work. Gu Yuan pointed in the opposite direction, exposing the lie on the spot. Ansi tried to recover, claiming he had simply gotten confused about the house layout, but the tension between them only grew heavier. The sun rose, bringing with it the sound of a red sports car pulling up in front of the mansion. Tianqin stepped out, looking flawless and ready to visit his fiancée. He stood at the doorway waiting. When the door finally opened, the bright light blinded him. The only thing he could make out was the silhouette of a blonde woman inviting him inside. He followed, stepping into the house with heightened senses and growing suspicion. The scene unfolds in a dimly lit living room, tension hanging in the air. Ansi, dressed in women's clothes, tries to hide his nerves by forcing a higher voice while speaking to Tianqin. The visitor gets straight to the point, asking whether the young woman belongs to the Li family. Realizing the disguise worked and he had not been recognized, Ansi lets out a relieved breath. At that moment, Gu Yuan steps in. His movements and posture perfectly imitate a woman, leaving no trace of the act. He approaches the visitor, extends a hand, and introduces himself as Lisa, the wealthy heiress of the house. Tianqin studies her suspiciously, especially unsettled by the bizarre voice of the supposed hostess. A heavy silence fills the room. Tianquin critically evaluates Lisa, judging whether she would make a suitable match for his friend Ansi. His conclusion is harsh. The girl looks completely ordinary, acts indifferent, and lacks any real presence. To him, the rumors about the incredible heiress seem like nothing more than a myth. The deception works perfectly, and he has no idea the young woman standing before him is actually a boy. Pushing aside his disappointment, Tianquin notices a few flyers on the table. They are insurance ads strategically planted by Gu Yuan. The trap works. While the visitor carefully reads through the material, the two disguised boys simply watch. Deep down, Gu Yuan celebrates the chance to hit his monthly sales goal. On the other side, Ansi keeps a cold expression while internally panicking. Terrified the lie will be exposed and spiral into complete disaster. The calm does not last long. Tianquin closes his eyes and tosses the paper aside. Eagerly, Gu Yuan tries to push the insurance sale, only to get hit with a blunt rejection. Instantly frustrated, irritation flashes across his face. The situation flips upside down when Tianquin shifts his attention to Ansi. Taking a closer look at the first girl he met, something suddenly clicks. She looks strangely familiar. Pressing the issue, the visitor demands to know who she really is. Caught completely off guard and cornered, Ansi freezes, utterly speechless with nowhere to run. An awkward silence takes over until Gu Yuan jumps in and takes control. Thinking on his feet, he blurts out that the frozen boy is simply Xiaoyan, one of the housemaids. Ansi grabs onto the excuse, nods quickly, and obeys the order to fetch snacks from the kitchen. Out of Tianquin's sight, relief washes over him, but the fear of the entire act collapsing at any second keeps him on edge. While the living room boils with tension, the real Lisu is bored out of her mind. Tired of video games and starving, she gives up on hiding away. Dragging her feet and in a terrible mood, she leaves her room in search of food, unknowingly heading straight into disaster. Back in the living room, Gu Yuan turns on the charm, stalling the guest with talk about how everyone could become great friends in the future. But the performance crumbles in an instant. Over Tianquin's shoulder, he spots the real Lisu casually walking through the hallway. The shock hits hard. Gu Yuan spits his tea straight into the visitor's face. Chaos erupts as he frantically apologizes for the mess. Suspicious, Tianquin threatens to turn around and look behind him. Gu Yuan immediately panics, blurting out a loud yell and forbidding him from turning around. Confused and startled, the visitor freezes. Out of options, Gu Yuan pulls the worst excuse imaginable, claiming the maid is changing clothes right there in the hallway. Tianquin looks horrified by how inappropriate that sounds, forcing Gu Yuan to awkwardly smile and double down on the lie, insisting the employee is completely eccentric and has no sense of boundaries. The bizarre atmosphere is interrupted when Ansi returns, announcing that the food is ready. The grand feast prepared for the distinguished guest? A cheap, greasy fast food combo with fried chicken, fries, and soda. But Ansi's mind is fixed entirely on the hallway. The truth is, he intentionally avoided preparing anything all day, creating the perfect trap to force the real Lisu out of her room from hunger, show up at the worst possible moment, and completely ruin Gu Yuan's disguise once and for all. The dining room remains painfully awkward. Tianquin stares at the fried chicken with clear disappointment, questioning the simplicity of the meal. Gu Yuan, fully committed to his role as Lisu, sarcastically replies that this is simply how things are done in the house. Behind the forced smile, however, fury burns. He shoots daggers at Ansi, silently demanding answers for such an absurd menu choice for their guest. Far from the tension downstairs, Ansi's trap begins to work. The smell of grease and fried chicken drifts through the halls and reaches the real Lisu's messy room. The scent of her favorite food wakes her like magic. Hypnotized by hunger, she heads toward the door. Disaster strikes instantly. She steps on a bottle tossed on the floor and crashes down hard. The loud thud echoes through the house, interrupting dinner. Tianquin immediately goes on alert and asks about the noise. Thinking fast, Gu Yuan blames it on the family cat knocking something over. Desperate to contain the damage, he offers to go check on the animal, leaving the two alone in the room. Alone with Ansi's disguise, the visitor finally drops his own act. Tianquin reveals that he already knows the truth. The maid is actually a man. Holding out a piece of fried chicken to Ansi, he bluntly tells him to stop this ridiculous cross-dressing charade. Meanwhile, in the back of the house, Gu Yuan enters what can only be described as a war zone, Lisu's room. The tension eases slightly once he confirms no visitors are inside. Suddenly, A hand emerges from the darkness and grabs his leg in desperation. It is Lisu, sprawled on the floor, silently begging for food with the hollow stare of a starving zombie. The scare drains all color from Gu Yuan's face. Just as she prepares to scream for food, panic kicks in. Desperate to keep the visit from falling apart, he throws himself at her and covers her mouth. The threat of being exposed hangs heavy in the air. In the dark room, Gu Yuan leans in until his face is inches from the real Lisu's, pressing a finger to his lips in a silent, desperate plea for quiet. Her response is immediate and merciless. One solid hit sends him straight to the floor. The crash echoes through the walls and reaches the kitchen, cutting through the suffocating tension between Tian Quinn and Ansi. The fake maid breaks into a cold sweat, convinced the game is finally over. Seeing an opening to escape the interrogation, Ansi tries using the noise as an excuse, saying he needs to check whether the mistress is okay. Tian Quinn blocks his path. Ignoring the chaos upstairs, he corners the boy and demands the truth about the female disguise. Before Ansi can stammer out an excuse, the visitor suddenly blurts out a completely ridiculous theory. He assumes the boy dressed as a maid is secretly the wealthy heiress's lover. While the misunderstanding spirals downstairs, an actual battle for survival unfolds in the hallway. Gu Yuan blocks the door with his own body. Overcome by hunger, Lisu radiates an almost monstrous aura, making it clear she would destroy anyone standing between her and food. In one swift motion, Gu Yuan grabs her by the waist to stop her advance. She struggles to break free, but the deafening growl of her stomach gives away her greatest weakness. Realizing brute force would never work against a starving beast, Gu Yuan changes tactics and offers a deal: food delivered to the door in exchange for absolute confinement inside the room. As if by magic, Lisu's murderous fury vanishes. She crosses her arms and accepts the terms immediately. With only 10 minutes to complete the mission, Gu Yuan finally lets go of her and exhales in relief. The real problem now is Tian Quinn, who downstairs has already built an entire forbidden and scandalous romance story in his head. In Tian Quinn's mind, a full-blown soap opera had already taken shape. He convinced himself that the boy disguised as a maid was actually the secret lover of the wealthy heiress, trapped in a forbidden romance held back by greedy executives and arranged marriages. Completely moved by his own theory, the visitor swore loyalty to the couple and promised to help them destroy the engagement contract. Ansi became absolutely certain his friend was insane, but he embraced the madness with open arms. After all, this bizarre fanfiction was the perfect solution to his problems. The peace does not last long once Gu Yuan arrives in the kitchen. Focused entirely on securing the fried chicken, he lies about the supposed cat incident and casually claims he stopped by the newly renovated bathroom on his way back. Fueled by his newfound heroic mission to unite star-crossed lovers, Tian Quinn decides to head upstairs himself and solve the situation personally. Gu Yuan stays behind, utterly confused by the visitor's intentions. Meanwhile, upstairs, Lisu is practically dying of hunger, reaching the point of drawing chicken drumsticks in the dust on the floor just to distract herself. The final disaster strikes through a simple wrong turn. Instead of heading to the bathroom, Tian Quinn opens the bedroom door and comes face to face with the real Lisu, kneeling on the floor waiting for food. Gu Yuan and Ansi arrive just in time to witness the scene. For Gu Yuan, it feels like the end of the road. The entire plan has turned to dust. For Ansi, it is nothing but victory and relief. Desperate, Gu Yuan throws out every pathetic excuse he can think of, but his words are ignored. Tian Quinn's shock takes a completely unexpected turn. The visitor is mesmerized. Ignoring the pitiful state of the starving girl, he finds her absolutely stunning. Hypnotized by the sight, Tian Quinn turns to Gu Yuan and demands to know if this beautiful young woman is the real Lisu, cornering the fraud completely. Ansi wastes no time. Spotting the perfect opportunity, he rushes over to the real Lisu and helps her up from the floor. Pretending to be concerned, he quietly drops the bomb in her ear. The arranged marriage would ruin her life, and this was their golden chance to blow up the engagement once and for all. On the other side of the room, Tian Quinn pieces everything together in his own bizarre way. Tapping his temple with a victorious grin, he accuses the fake Lisu of lying and proudly declares that he has uncovered the house's entire scheme. That is when the real Lisu completely flips the situation. Leaving behind her starving zombie mode, she suddenly carries herself like a flawless high society lady. With a sharp smile, she greets Tian Quinn and throws out the bait. She claims all the previous chaos was merely a test, an elaborate performance staged by the family, one that he, with his brilliant mind, managed to expose. Panicking, Gu Yuan tries to stammer out an excuse, but she shuts him down instantly. Lisu presses a finger to the fraud's lips, demanding silence as she takes complete control of the situation. Gu Yuan freezes in shock. He has never seen the girl talk this much, let alone act with such cunning. Completely charmed by the act, Tian Qin falls right into the trap. He looks at her with fascination and shakes her hand without hesitation. The scene cuts to the living room, where Lisu and the visitor are now chatting comfortably. Hidden behind the wall, Gu Yuan spies on them while cornering Ansi, demanding to know what exactly he whispered to the girl to make her change so quickly. Ansi simply shrugs, pretending it was nothing important. In the living room, Lisu gracefully keeps the lie alive, asking if the guest enjoyed the special presentation the family had prepared. Completely captivated, Tian Qin agrees, fully won over by the true heiress. The visitor is now entirely under her spell. He showers the heiress with compliments, pointing out how she is infinitely more beautiful than any house assistant. Hidden nearby and deeply offended, Gu Yuan burns with rage, absolutely convinced his female disguise looked 1,000 times better than the original. Tian Qin quickly gets to the point and asks for the real reason behind all the pretending. Before Lisu can even come up with an excuse, her brain completely short-circuits. Her attention is hijacked by the abandoned fried chicken sitting on the table. Hunger takes over. Saliva starts building, and she stares at the food with unsettling obsession. The mood instantly shifts. The girl's fixed, starving stare puts everyone in the room on high alert. Gu Yuan panics, already anticipating an incoming meltdown. Taking advantage of the tension, Ansi quickly whispers a reminder that this is their last chance to destroy the marriage arrangement. The warning works. Lisu coughs awkwardly, swallows her hunger, and flips the switch. Suddenly adopting an intense and irritated tone, she cuts off the small talk. Rising to her feet, she marches straight toward Tian Qin, declaring that she has a crucial and urgent request to make. The visitor walks right into the trap. Soft-hearted as ever, he locks eyes with her, eagerly waiting for the dramatic confession he assumes is coming. What he fails to notice is her real objective. Using the emotional tension as the perfect distraction, Lisu's hands quietly inch toward the food box, ready to make their final move and steal a piece of fried chicken. The distraction works perfectly. Lisu finally reaches the long-awaited drumstick, while Tian Qin remains completely hypnotized by her presence, patiently waiting for the supposedly important request. Placing a hand over her chest and speaking in a solemn tone, she drops the bombshell. She begs the visitor to help her cancel the arranged marriage agreement. The revelation shocks nearly everyone in the room. The only one smirking in satisfaction is Ansi, silently celebrating the total success of his plan, but the obstacle returns. Just as Lisu opens her mouth to finally take her first bite, Tian Qin interrupts her. He wants to understand why she rejects the engagement. Irritated by yet another obstacle standing between her and food, Lisu quickly improvises a dramatic backstory. She paints herself as an oppressed heiress, describing an entire childhood of strict family control, forced etiquette lessons, and zero freedom. Now being pushed into a loveless marriage, she claims she only wants to take control of her own destiny. The story lands perfectly. Behind the scenes, Gu Yuan cannot help but sympathize with Lisu's situation, finally realizing the crushing weight of her family's expectations. In the living room, the effect is immediate. Deeply moved by her tragic story and swept up in a sudden burst of heroism, Tian Qin steps forward, firmly grabs Lisu by the shoulders, and promises to protect her and solve the engagement contract problem. The sudden movement, however, comes with a tragic price. The jolt makes the chicken drumstick slip from Lisu's hands and fall straight onto the floor. Instantly, all color drains from her face as she stares at the fallen food in complete shock and devastation. Ironically, Tian Qin notices her pale expression and becomes even more convinced that she is simply overwhelmed with emotion by his support. The situation shifts again when Tian Qin reaches his final decision. He informs the fake housemaids that he fully understands the situation and will contact his uncle to tear up the marriage contract once and for all. Ansi silently celebrates the complete success of his plan, while Gu Yuan scrambles to stop the disaster, warning the visitor that he is jumping to conclusions. Completely detached from the fate of her own engagement, Lisu has only one target in mind. She grabs the fallen chicken drumstick and raises it toward her mouth, eyes glowing with determination. But in the exact millisecond before she can take a bite, heavy knocking echoes throughout the house. The scare is immediate, and the snack slips from her hands again, crashing onto the floor for the second time. Curious about yet another unwanted visitor, Gu Yuan heads to the door. As he opens it, he looks down and nearly mistakes the newcomer for a child. The misunderstanding lasts only a moment. The man is incredibly short, but carries himself with the untouchable authority of a boss. He does not arrive alone. A squad of bodyguards marches in behind him, lining up with military precision to create a secure pathway. Completely ignored by the arrogant little man, Gyu Yuan simply watches. The stranger walks straight past him, stops in front of Lisu, and instantly identifies her as the true heiress of the family. He introduces himself as Bin, Tian Quin's official agent. After a quick bow and a brief apology for any inconvenience, the agent immediately gets to the point. This meeting must remain completely secret to protect the celebrity's public image. Midway through his speech, Bin turns and locks eyes with his client. Tian Quin freezes instantly, wearing the exact expression of someone caught red-handed. Chaos erupts in the room when Tian Quin drops to his knees, desperately begging for mercy from his agent. The tactic fails miserably. Cold and calculating, Bin simply orders his security team to drag the celebrity back home. Ignoring his client's desperate claims that everything is just one huge misunderstanding, the agent declares that the day's headaches have already gone far beyond acceptable limits. Ansi and Gyu Yuan watch the spectacle unfold from the sidelines, completely clueless about what is happening. In the middle of the chaos, Lisu ignores all the drama and focuses entirely on her prize. For the third time, she prepares to reclaim the fried chicken, but luck betrays her once again. Bin's shadow looms over her. He notices the girl, quickly figures out she is hungry, and asks about the food. Before Lisu can even speak to protect her precious meal, Gyu Yuan interrupts and generously offers everything to the visitor. The agent accepts without hesitation, takes the entire meal and leaves, while the heiress is left crying in pure frustration. Trying to fix the damage, Gyu Yuan approaches her with the same old excuse that he was only acting in her best interest. Lisu immediately loses what little patience she had left. Cutting him off, she demands to know who gave him the right to control her life. Without holding back, she lays everything bare. She knows the only reason he got involved in the first place was because of her mother's money. Tired of having her freedom handled by others, the girl swears she will destroy the business arrangement herself. Fully aware that Gyu Yuan acts out of self-interest, pressed about what she truly wants, fury completely takes over. Lisu explodes, shouting at the top of her lungs that the injustice ends now and that she refuses to be manipulated like a puppet in someone else's game. After pouring everything out, she turns around and runs out of the house, leaving the boys alone. The guilt hits Gyu Yuan immediately once he enters the bedroom. Relieved that the bizarre performance is finally over, Ansi checks on his friend. Jaw clenched and bitterness sitting heavily in his chest, Gyu Yuan brushes him off. Pulling off the female wig, he is finally forced to confront his own hypocrisy. The truth is, he had been acting purely out of selfishness. That realization opens a Pandora's box, dragging his thoughts back into the past and toward the lonely grief surrounding his mother's death. Back then, cruel whispers branded him the black sheep of an entire bloodline obsessed with profits. With no one to lean on, he swallowed his depression and carried the weight of that loss alone for years. Determined to break the cycle and fix the damage done to the girl's life, he marches straight to corporate headquarters to confront Li Sao. In the lobby, the director is discussing confidential strategies with a subordinate, while Gyu Yuan is stopped at reception for not having an appointment. Refusing to back down, he insists on the urgency of the matter, causing enough commotion to catch the executive's attention herself. Li Sao approaches to understand the issue at the front desk, and Gyu Yuan immediately cuts through the tension with an ironic greeting about how long it has been since they last saw each other. The scene quickly shifts to the closed doors of the executive office. Face to face with the director, he wastes no time. He explains the harsh reality he witnessed with the heiress and delivers his final verdict. The forced relationship must be canceled. Inside the executive office, Li Sao's reaction completely breaks expectations. Cold and unshaken, she dismisses Gyu Yuan's plea about the heiress's freedom of choice. Instead of giving in, the executive corners him, questioning whether he is simply abandoning his mission and using the idea of freedom as an excuse to run away. She lays reality bare. Lisu is not just any girl. She is the centerpiece in the family's and the corporation's power game. Without backing down, Gyu Yuan firmly stands his ground, insisting that the girl's future belongs only to her. Realizing directly challenging the corporation's rules would get him nowhere, he changes tactics and asks the key question: what exactly happened in the past that shaped Lisu into the person she is today? The atmosphere in the office shifts instantly. Li Sao's gaze pierces through the boy, heavy and calculating, before slowly breaking into a short, quiet laugh. The director admits she has been waiting for this moment for a long time, because understanding the past was the only way to make Gyu Yuan finally take the entire situation seriously. Without wasting any time, Li Sao opens the Vault of Secrets. The turning point in Li Su's life began during childhood, when she became inseparable from the son of one of the company's directors. Their friendship was innocent, built around manga and video games, until the adult world came crashing down on them. The boy's father sank into massive gambling debts and decided to rob both the family fortune and the corporation itself. The firing was immediate, but the retaliation was far uglier. Cornered and desperate, the ex-director's family weaponized the children's friendship and targeted the easiest victim, young Li Su. Sitting across from Li Sao, Gyu Yuan listens to the story with his blood running cold, already sensing the disaster still to come. The trauma of Li Su's past carried an unforgivable betrayal. She was locked inside a basement, gagged and tied to a pipe, kidnapped by the debt-ridden father of her own best friend. The boy himself tried to ease his guilt, claiming they had no other choice. Li Su's life was priced at 500,000 yuan, with direct death threats carved permanently into the girl's memory. Back in the present, the weight of the story completely changes Gyu Yuan's attitude. He returns home, stops outside Li Su's bedroom door, and finally abandons his old arrogance. In a sincere confession, he apologizes for being selfish and for never trying to understand her scars. As a peace offering, he leaves a box of her favorite fried chicken on the floor and quietly walks away. The bait works instantly. The door swings open. Li Su drags the food inside, and after spending the entire day starving, she finally attacks the meal with desperate hunger. Elsewhere, Tian Qin is fully committed to playing the hero. Sitting in his office, he picks up the phone, ready to call his uncle and cancel the engagement, sparing Li Su from more suffering. But the attempt is crushed by Bin. The agent storms into the office, snatches the phone from the celebrity's hands, and grabs him firmly by the shoulders. With a deadly stare, he gives the final order. For the sake of his career, Tian Qin is forbidden from getting involved in this mess. Li Su's mind, however, remains trapped inside the dark basement of the past. Broken by betrayal and unable to move, she struggles to cry for help after spotting a thin crack of light. The basement door creaks open, and the silhouette of her former best friend appears in the darkness, preparing to deliver another cruel warning. The kidnapper tears the tape from Li Su's mouth, not to free her, but to poison her even further. Wearing a sadistic smile, he claims she deserves this fate because of her arrogance. In the suffocating darkness of the basement, exhausted and powerless, Li Su desperately clings to the past, asking how someone who used to be her friend could possibly become this cruel. The answer comes in the form of a bitter laugh echoing through the room, crushing whatever hope she still had left. The traitor shows no mercy. He humiliates her, spilling cruel truths one after another. The friendship had always been fake, fueled only by her mother's money. Deep down, everyone saw her as spoiled, boring, and completely lacking personality. Spending time with her, he admits, had been nothing more than a sacrifice that lasted far too long. Li Su is forced to face a brutal reality. She never truly had friends, only parasites interested in her family's fortune. The silence that follows is shattered by the sound of the basement door being kicked open. Armed police officers storm inside, shouting commands as they overpower the criminal within seconds. Li Sao rushes into the chaos, running straight toward her daughter while officers pin the man to the ground in handcuffs. Her embrace is tight, overflowing with desperate relief. Li Su cries in her mother's arms, finally feeling safe and protected. But the trauma leaves deep scars. In the memory of that day, while her mind struggles to process her rescue, her eyes lock onto something strangely specific behind her mother. A remote control device, an odd detail that, to young Li Su, feels mysteriously connected to her own life and the fate waiting ahead. That remote control, burned into her childhood memories, becomes the symbol of a life controlled by others. Video games eventually become her only safe escape from the crushing pressure of society and endless expectations. Completely unaware of this trauma, Gyu Yuan enters her room holding a brand new controller, naively trying to reconnect with her. He finds Li Su in terrible condition, trapped inside living nightmares of her past. In an awkward attempt to comfort her, Gyu Yuan gently touches her face and invites her to play. Li Su reacts with pure disgust. To her, his intentions are painfully obvious. He only wants access to her family's money. Gyu Yuan keeps insisting, swearing he has changed and does not want to force her into anything, yet his words immediately contradict themselves. He shakes the girl, begging for cooperation and repeating that everything he is doing is supposedly for her own good. But Li Su has already reached her breaking point. The tension explodes the moment he says the word friends. The word triggers something devastating inside Lisu's mind. The cruel words of her former betrayer come flooding back. Friendship is nothing but a lie, a label greedy people use to get close to her mother's fortune. Fear and distrust swallow her whole once again. She snaps, screaming at him to get out of her sight. The door slams shut, leaving Ju Yuan standing alone in the hallway, forced to face the brutal truth that earning the trust of this wounded fox will be the hardest challenge of his life. Meanwhile, behind the curtain of public life, the pressure keeps growing. Tian Quin's agent hardens his tone, cornering the celebrity and strictly forbidding any further interference in the Li family's complicated affairs. The walls are closing in on everyone. Bin lays Tian Quin's future out in brutal terms: a destroyed career, endless scandals, and the complete collapse of his public image if he keeps involving himself with the Li family. Bin's investigation leaves no room for doubt. He searched the house thoroughly and uncovered fatal inconsistencies. No women's shoes anywhere, men's clothing scattered throughout the place, and insurance flyers strategically planted like bait. To Bin, the conclusion is obvious. The heiress is nothing more than a fabricated character. Tian Quin tries to brush off the observations as conspiracy theories, but the agent has no patience for delusions. Bin reinforces that the connection between the families is purely financial and that an idol's reputation should never be risked over staged games. When Tian Quin attempts to argue back, the agent's tone shifts immediately. The threat is direct and chilling. Bin makes it crystal clear that he has the power to erase anyone who gets in the way of his plans. Visibly terrified, the celebrity folds on the spot. Satisfied with his submission, Bin ends the conversation, focused solely on preserving the business alliance. Before leaving, he also makes note of his suspicions about Ansi, who had been caught disguised during the inspection. The story shifts back in time, revealing the origin of Lisu's obsession with fried chicken. Years earlier, during an ordinary phone call, young Lisu asked her mother what was for dinner. Despite worrying about her daughter's health and appearance, Lisao gave in and stopped at a fast food restaurant to buy 10 chicken wings. While waiting for her mother, Lisu endured a nightmare of a school life. Isolated and alone, she had become the favorite target of a group of bullies. The insults came non-stop as they publicly humiliated her and mocked her appearance, treating her like some unwanted beggar. Lost in defensive silence, the girl tried to ignore the taunts while quietly eating her burger, but her indifference only fueled the aggressors' anger. Unable to stand being ignored, they quickly escalated things into physical violence. The humiliation reaches its peak when one of the girls forcefully grabs Lisu's face, demanding her full attention. The insults grow even uglier, attacking her gender identity and treating her like some kind of freak who deserves nothing more than scraps. With one sharp movement, her tray is knocked onto the floor, food scattering everywhere while the bullies pour out their pointless cruelty. At the exact moment the restaurant announces an order is ready, the bully's attention is broken by the arrival of two boys, Ansi and Tian Quin. Tian Quin immediately takes on a superior tone, confronting the group and bluntly declaring that they are just as ugly on the inside as they are on the outside. The gang leader prepares to lash back, but her friends stop her the moment they recognize Ansi as the heir to the powerful An family. Realizing the newcomer's social status is untouchable, the group backs off, throwing out empty threats before fleeing. Ignoring the bullies entirely, Ansi approaches Lisu and offers her his fries in a rare act of kindness, a gesture that does not go unnoticed by Li Sao, who has been quietly watching the scene from afar. Time cuts back to the present, inside the kitchen. Gu Yuan and Ansi are trapped in the tension of their failed plan. Gu Yuan lets out a heavy sigh, draining what little patience Ansi has left as he tries to focus on work. The exchange of insults is immediate, with Gu Yuan dismissing Ansi's strategy as boring and completely pointless. The real problem, however, is far more dangerous and practical. The agreement Gu Yuan made with director Li. Grabbing Ansi's hands, he confesses his financial desperation. If he fails to fulfill the deal, he will be hit with a crushing penalty of 1 million yen. Completely broke and desperate to escape the trap, Gu Yuan pressures Ansi once again, frantically searching for any way to avoid financial ruin. Ansi is brutally realistic. He knows he cannot force a marriage or expect sympathy from director Li Sao. When Gu Yuan questions how certain Ansi is about Li Sao's inflexibility, the answer is harsh. In Ansi's eyes, people like her do not care about family happiness, only company profit. Children are nothing more than assets in a negotiation. Pressed about how he knows so much about wealthy families, Ansi awkwardly brushes it off, joking that he watches way too many soap operas. Switching focus to a reconciliation strategy, Ansi suggests Gu Yuan bring food to Li Su. Reluctant but out of options, he accepts the mission. Opening her bedroom door, he finds Li Su hidden in complete darkness. Her silence immediately unsettles him, but he carefully approaches, places the food on the floor, and gently insists that she eat. The mood shifts when Li Su, still hurt, reveals that she already knows everything, the financial contract between him and her mother. She opens up, venting about the crushing weight of that 1 million yuan, and labeling herself nothing more than a burden. What should have become another argument instead takes an unexpected turn. Li Su expects panic, excuses, maybe even tears, but Gu Yuan firmly declares that the debt is his problem and that he will deal with it himself, without dragging her into it. The determination in his voice catches Li Su completely off guard. By the time Gu Yuan leaves the room, the anger inside her has faded, replaced by something unfamiliar: hope. For the first time, someone actually seems willing to carry the weight of the world for her without demanding the price of her freedom. But Li Su's relief does not last long. The moment Gu Yuan steps away from the door, the mask of courage crumbles. Alone in the hallway, he quietly breaks down, crushed by the reality of his financial collapse. When he finds Ansi again, the question of how to raise 1 million yen becomes the center of the crisis. Ansi offers two options: negotiate directly with director Li Sao or ask Li Su herself for help. Gu Yuan immediately rejects the first option as suicide and stubbornly refuses the second with visceral determination. He refuses to cross the line of asking for help from the very girl he has already hurt so much. In a burst of desperation, he declares that he will find the money himself, even if it means abandoning his moral compass and betraying his own principles. He storms off, slamming the door behind him and leaving Ansi alone with the echo of uncertainty. Inside his room, Gu Yuan spirals deeper into isolation. His mother's lessons about independence, once comforting, now sound like a cruel verdict on his insignificance. The world feels like a jungle where betrayal is the only certainty and trust is a luxury he can no longer afford. On the other side of the wall, Li Su hears every word. The crushing feeling of being a permanent burden hits her like a physical blow. Moved by a sudden and deeply unsettling impulse, she slowly walks toward her desk. Her eyes settle on the nightstand. Hidden there is something that could either change the course of that debt forever, or finally end the cycle of problems she believes follows her everywhere. Li Su pulls an old phone from its hiding place, her hands trembling as she scrolls through the call history. It is a tool she has avoided for a long time, but her desperation to help Gu Yuan forces her to break the silence. She finds her mother Li Sao's contact and makes the call. The moment the device vibrates and her mother's voice echoes through the speaker, the impact is physical. Li Su instinctively retreats into the corner of the room, frozen with fear, but the voice on the other end does not let her escape. Her voice trembling, Li Su finally forces herself to speak. Hearing her daughter after so long, Li Sao's rigid composure immediately crumbles into relieved sobs. Struggling to breathe properly, Li Su whispers the fatal number: 1 million. The silence on the line is absolute, broken only by the quiet sound of the executive trying to hold back tears. Sharp as ever, Li Sao instantly connects the dots. She realizes the call is not about regret over the engagement, but about Li Su trying to save Gu Yuan from the debt he created himself. In the director's mind, a new strategy immediately begins taking shape. She pictures the desperate young man, the shaky engagement, and the growing bond between the two. To Li Sao, this looks like the perfect opportunity. If she refuses to forgive the debt now, she can pressure her daughter into playing an entirely new role. "Yes, I know exactly which penalty you're talking about," Li Sao says coldly, confirming Gu Yuan's debt without hesitation. Before ending the call, the mother simply wishes her daughter good luck. Li Su remains frozen, clutching the phone as the emptiness in her chest turns into complete confusion. She cannot tell whether she just secured Gu Yuan's freedom or handed over the final piece her mother needed to control them both. The trap has officially been set. The atmosphere turns tense when Tian Qin offers to cancel Li Su's engagement. Instead of comforting her, the suggestion only enrages the girl, who accuses him of trying to push her toward a rival. Through tears, she accidentally confirms his worst fears. Yet even as Li Su breaks down, the young man's expression remains disturbingly cold. Suddenly, the scene cuts away. It was only a nightmare. Tian Qin wakes up disoriented, immediately deciding that he needs to track Li Su down and fix a lie he told long ago. The first obstacle is his own manager. They are in the same room, but exhaustion finally knocks the woman out on the couch. Taking advantage of the opening, the actor quietly slips away and secretly calls his informant. At last, the investigation pays off. The contact has located the school Lee Soo attends and promises to send the address immediately. The plan nearly falls apart when the manager suddenly wakes up, instantly sensing something suspicious. Tien Kin hides his phone in the blink of an eye and plays innocent, but the woman remains convinced he is plotting behind her back. At school, the infiltration begins. Dressed in dark clothes, the celebrity moves unnoticed past a group of girls praising his latest music releases. His ego swells for a moment under the compliments, but the real objective quickly takes priority. Scanning the courtyard, he finds her. Lee Soo is sitting beneath a tree, completely absorbed in a video game, with Tony nearby keeping watch. The intruder wastes no time, announcing their reunion and asking whether she still remembers him. Tony immediately dislikes the interruption. Taking point, the friend confronts the newcomer and demands to know exactly who he is and what he wants. The tension quickly shifts into something bizarre when Tony notices the stranger and Lee Soo are wearing nearly identical outfits. Convinced he has uncovered the hidden truth behind the matching appearance, Tony grits his teeth and braces himself for confrontation. The aggressive posture of Tony's group disappears instantly. The moment they recognize the newcomer, the boys completely switch attitudes, line up in formation, and bow respectfully, treating the celebrity as their honored brother-in-law. Completely confused, Tien Kin simply rolls with it, assuming it is just another weird fan behavior. At that exact moment, Anansi arrives. The second he spots his friend caught in the middle of the chaos, instinct takes over and he ducks behind a tree for cover. But the hiding spot reveals an even bigger problem. Nearby, a woman openly flirts with Gu Yuan, promising easy money in exchange for a nighttime visit. Remembering his friend's recent obsession with making money at any cost, Anansi realizes Gu Yuan is dangerously close to crossing a line he cannot take back. Panic makes him forget to stay hidden. Bursting out from behind the tree, he stumbles into Lee Soo's circle and blurts out the emergency. Tien Kin instantly recognizes him, loudly questioning why he is not overseas. In pure desperation, Anansi slaps a hand over his friend's mouth to silence him, immediately earning Tony's fury for attacking his supposed brother-in-law. Ignoring the complaints, Anansi quickly explains Gu Yuan's dangerous plan and begs for Lee Soo's help. The response is absolute indifference. She remains hypnotized by the screen of her handheld console, barely acknowledging the situation. Watching her total lack of concern while Tien Kin keeps struggling to figure out who is suddenly buried in financial problems, reality finally hits Anansi. There will be no backup. He is going to have to stop this disaster himself. Unable to rely on the gamer girl, Anansi takes control of the situation. To finally get the chatty celebrity's attention, he smacks him and drags him under a nearby tree, laying out the entire crisis surrounding Gu Yuan. The pieces finally click together inside the singer's mind, but seriousness is nowhere to be found. Tien Kin bursts into uncontrollable laughter after learning Anansi was the disguised maid all along, leaving the boy absolutely furious. Ignoring the mockery, Anansi gets straight to the point and asks to borrow 1 million. The artist sighs helplessly, explaining that his finances are completely controlled by others, before asking why Anansi does not simply get the money from his father. The answer comes quickly and bluntly. Unlike TV dramas, real-life allowances do not cover that kind of disaster. As an alternative, Tien Kin throws out an absurd idea, suggesting that Anansi simply marry Lee Soo and solve the entire problem at once. The proposal gets rejected immediately. Hours later, the late afternoon brings nothing but dread. Anansi waits nervously in the living room, but Gu Yuan never returns, confirming his worst fears. The funeral-like atmosphere is suddenly shattered when the bedroom door swings open. Lee Soo emerges completely transformed, dressed in elegant, formal clothes, flawless makeup, and perfectly styled hair. She ignores the stunned expression on Anansi's face and simply gives the order. It is time for the rescue mission. Already walking through the city at sunset, Anansi admits they are moving completely blind. He is wrong. Lee Soo reveals that she is already one step ahead, having enlisted Tony's computer skills to hack and track the target's phone. Within minutes, the exact coordinates flash across her screen. With their destination locked in, Lee Soo lays down the final rule. The moment they arrive at the meeting spot, Anansi is absolutely forbidden from going inside with her. The reason Anansi is banned at the door is simple. The tracker points to what appears to be a brothel operating under the disguise of a coffee shop. In Lee Soo's eyes, her partner's innocent high school boy face would only attract unwanted attention. Studying the cafe's flawless cover, she confidently sets the pace of the mission, promising she will drag the boy out quickly and still make it home in time to eat fried chicken. The bell above the entrance rings. Lee Soo walks in alone, greeted by the staff while her eyes immediately scan the room for her friend. The grand infiltration mission, however, takes an unexpectedly hilarious turn. Lisu is quickly approached by a well-dressed waiter ready to take her order. She freezes the moment she realizes the elegant employee is actually Gu Yuan himself. The boy also takes a few seconds to recognize her beneath the flawless formal makeover, but eventually, the truth clicks. The entire sense of danger instantly evaporates when Lisu realizes there is no criminal front at all. The place is literally just an ordinary coffee shop. The woman who recruited Gu Yuan walks over to ask if there is a problem. Gu Yuan casually reassures her, introducing Lisu as family. The recruiter immediately changes her attitude, showering the relative with kindness and special treatment. Before the dust can settle, a third figure suddenly crashes into the scene. Tian Qin appears out of nowhere with an overly dramatic, heroic speech, proudly confessing that he secretly followed them because he refused to miss a rescue mission. Completely full of himself, the celebrity expects Anansi and Gu Yuan to be shocked by his stealthy entrance. The mysterious hero act, however, falls apart instantly. The cafe owner recognizes him on sight. Losing all composure, the woman lunges at the singer with an overwhelming hug, screaming at the top of her lungs that she is hopelessly in love with her idol. The situation spirals completely out of control within seconds. The disguise is blown, and dozens of hysterical fans pull out their phones, swallowing the celebrity in a storm of flashes and screaming voices. Taking full advantage of the chaos, Lisu grabs Gu Yuan by the clothes and makes an irresistible offer: ditch the madness and head home for fried chicken. Without a second thought, he agrees. Grabbing her hand, the two force their way through the crowd and escape toward the street. Trapped in the fan frenzy, Tian Qin desperately begs for rescue as he watches them flee, only to be completely ignored. Outside, anxiety is eating Anansi alive. He paces endlessly in front of the building until he finally sees his friends emerge safely, hand in hand. His immediate relief quickly turns into a lecture. Anansi threatens to call the police if Gu Yuan ever gets involved in that kind of shady business again, all while checking him from head to toe for injuries. Completely baffled by the drama, Gu Yuan insists he is perfectly fine and points back toward the cafe, explaining that the only person truly suffering in there is the celebrity. As if to prove the point, a furious and panicked manager rushes past them at that exact moment, desperately hunting for her missing star. The adrenaline rush finally catches up to everyone. The overwhelming environment triggers Lisu's social anxiety, causing the girl to suddenly collapse. Acting on pure instinct, the two boys catch her before she can hit the ground. With the unconscious girl now riding piggyback on Gu Yuan's back, the truth about the place finally becomes clear to Anansi. His friend had simply picked up an honest side job waiting tables. Feeling unfairly judged, Gu Yuan asks whether he honestly looks like someone who would sell his own body, only to receive a loud and brutally honest yes in response. Despite the savage honesty, the night ends peacefully. Rather than taking offense, Gu Yuan simply smiles, genuinely touched that his friends were willing to go to such ridiculous lengths to rescue him. The warm atmosphere lasts only a moment. Anansi immediately ruins it by reminding Gu Yuan of the terrifying reality of his 1 million yuan debt. The debtor responds with pure sarcasm, mockingly thanking him for the reality check. Later, back in the safety of home, Lisu finally wakes up. The moment she notices Gu Yuan approaching with food, her defensive instincts immediately kick in, and she retreats all the way into the corner of the room. Understanding the message, Gu Yuan quietly places the meal on the floor and prepares to leave. Then comes the surprise. Lisu stops him, silently extending a video game controller, an unspoken invitation to play together. Excited by the opportunity to grow closer, Gu Yuan accepts instantly. The problem? The game she chooses is a notoriously chaotic cooperative restaurant simulator famous for destroying friendships. Gu Yuan performs terribly. Lisu ends up carrying the entire session on her back, but her patience wears thin fast. After yet another catastrophic mistake followed by another useless apology, she finally snaps and physically shoves him out of the room. From the sidelines, Anansi watches the whole thing unfold without even looking away from the show playing on his phone. Elsewhere, the mood is far less friendly. Bin corners Tian Qin and unleashes a brutal scolding over the cafe disaster. She makes it painfully clear that she had to activate an enormous network of connections to bury the story and stop the scandal from making front-page headlines. The celebrity tries to paint himself as an unfairly criticized hero who was simply helping friends, but Bin cuts straight to the real issue, him hugging and getting physically affectionate with a fan in the middle of a crowd full of cameras. After trying to downplay it, the singer finally caves and admits fault once Bin hits him with yet another cold threat. In another corner of the story, Executive Lisao casually speaks with her daughter over the phone from her office. Lisu asks permission to buy a new collectible figure, and her mother approves the purchase without hesitation. The light-hearted mood disappears instantly, however, when Lisao casually asks for the price. On the other end of the call, the girl freezes into nervous silence, suddenly terrified of revealing the real cost. Lisao looked at that 1 million yuan gift with pure contempt. The astronomical amount did not fool her for a second. She knew exactly what her daughter was trying to do. Switching attitudes in an instant, Lisao pretended to be concerned, questioning whether Gu Yuan had manipulated the girl. Determined to stop any secret transfer of money, she immediately cut off Lisu's access to the family funds while the boy was away. Meanwhile, at school, Ansi had completely different priorities, playing video games during computer class. One of his classmates casually suggested that with those gaming skills, he could probably start making money from matches. Back at Lisao's house, the atmosphere remained tense. Gu Yuan tried offering food to Lisu, but the girl refused to open the door, demanding instead that he slide the tray underneath the gap. The plate was violently snatched away by her hands. Gu Yuan vented his frustration, bringing up the cafe incident, but Lisu only seemed to sink deeper into isolation. He was growing increasingly upset over her gaming addiction and exhausted appearance, marked by deep, dark circles beneath her eyes. Ignoring Gu Yuan's frustration, Ansi suggested that Lisu's isolation was not exactly unusual, and that what she truly lacked was basic social interaction. Gu Yuan completely misunderstood the implication, visibly flustered as his thoughts immediately drifted somewhere romantic. He even started awkwardly listing Lisu's physical qualities before Ansi bluntly cut him off, clarifying that she was talking about genuine friendship. Ansi points out that there are secrets between Lisao and Lisu that nobody else could possibly understand. The conclusion becomes obvious. Lisu desperately needs someone she can trust, a best friend to confide in, vent to, and share the things her mother never allows her to express. The idea itself sounds simple. Find someone who shares Lisu's interests. Cosmetics, clothes, fashion tips, and boy secrets would be perfect conversation topics, preferably far away from Ju Yuan's ears. The boy immediately questions how they could possibly find someone for Lisu so quickly. Ansi keeps it realistic. With Lisu's withdrawn personality and difficult attitude, the mission borders on impossible. Nobody would have the patience to deal with her. The next day, a mysterious new girl appears at school. Looking completely lost on campus, she asks around for Lisu's whereabouts. The students waste no time filling her in. Lisu is the most popular girl around and is probably already in class. Thanking them, the newcomer heads toward the classroom, quietly puzzled by the sudden reputation of the girl she came looking for. Inside the classroom, boredom fills the air. While everyone waits for the teacher, Lisu is completely focused on her game, proudly celebrating the first profit she has managed to make. Her concentration is abruptly shattered when the newcomer approaches and calls her by name. Lisu slowly looks up, confused, unable to recognize this stranger who seems to have appeared out of nowhere. Watching from afar, Gu Yuan feels hopeful for the first time. He genuinely believes Lisu may finally have a companion and that a real friendship could grow from this meeting. But the dream of a wholesome encounter gets shattered within seconds. Without even pretending to be friendly, the newcomer stares Lisu down and bluntly asks one question: would she be brave enough to fight? Lisu's answer would decide whether the challenge was officially accepted. The challenge instantly throws the classroom into chaos. When one of Lisu's allies questions the stranger's audacity for speaking to Mrs. Li like that, the response comes in the form of a punch powerful enough to send him flying across the room. Furious at seeing his people humiliated, Tony rushes forward, only for the newcomer to reveal terrifying agility, effortlessly taking down his entire group. Overflowing with confidence, the girl declares everyone there weak before marching directly toward Lisu. In one motion, she snatches the console from Lisu's hands, abruptly interrupting the game that had finally started earning her money. Furious, Lisu watches her most precious possession get taken away. Gu Yuan desperately steps between them, trying to calm things down and encourage actual conversation. But the intruder makes her intentions crystal clear. She did not come to talk. She came to win. After defeating Lisu, she boldly declares Gu Yuan will belong to her and her alone. Gu Yuan's grand plan to create a support system for Lisu crashes and burns spectacularly. What he hoped would become a friendship has instantly transformed into a dangerous rivalry. The story suddenly flashes back years earlier, inside a KFS restaurant. Back then, the same arrogant girl was actually a constant victim of bullying. She once cried after hearing encouraging words from Anssi, who casually admitted he admired brave girls. Inspired, she completely reinvented herself. Throwing herself into taekwondo with fierce determination, she trained relentlessly until she surpassed every boy who had once humiliated her. Transformed, she carefully prepared a love confession meant for Anssi, but the ending was cruel. When Tien Kin later asks whether Anssi accepted her confession, Anssi casually admits that he rejected her. Surprised, Tien Kin asks why, especially since she seemed amazing. Ansi's answer is painfully dismissive. She simply was not his type. The rejection crushes her completely. The confession letter, the symbol of all her effort and determination, ends up abandoned on the ground, mercilessly stepped on while life moves forward without hesitation. The wound never truly healed. Learning about the engagement in the present day, the girl realizes she has no choice but to act if she wants to reclaim the man she still loves. In her mind, the competition is no ordinary rival. It is someone who demands maximum effort to defeat. Back in the classroom, the tension reaches a breaking point. Gu Yuan attempts diplomacy, trying to explain that Li Su is not even interested in the engagement and that her own family is against the arrangement. Right in the middle of the chaos, Anssi appears at the classroom door, drawn in by the commotion. The newcomer instantly changes strategies, seeing her plans threatened by his arrival, and with half the classroom already defeated around her, she decides to play the victim. Clutching her own shoulder dramatically, she throws Anssi a desperate look and loudly demands to know how Gu Yuan could ever attack a defenseless girl. The performance is flawless. She bursts into dramatic tears, accusing the boy of hurting her. Completely stunned, Gu Yuan tries to process the sudden reversal, but it is already too late. The girl dramatically faints on cue. Believing every second of the act, Anssi immediately scoops her into his arms and rushes toward the nurse's office. Along the way, noticing the redness on her face, he innocently concludes, without the slightest suspicion, that the fall must have seriously hurt her head. The gray-haired doctor remained completely calm inside the room, instantly diffusing any sense of tragedy, while the blonde young man in a suit, visibly tense, questioned the dramatic collapse. She got straight to the point. There was no emergency at all. The red-haired girl wasn't in danger. She was simply exhausted and sleeping so deeply that she was snoring and drooling on the examination bed. The revelation hit the young man like a bucket of cold water. Embarrassment spread across his face, and he thanked the doctor in a dry tone, clearly annoyed at having fallen for the act. Left alone with the girl, he watched her under the light pouring in through the window. The panic from earlier slowly gave way to quiet exhaustion. Arms crossed, he let out a long sigh, trying to process the absurdity of the situation, while she remained deep in an oddly comical sleep. Little by little, his irritation faded. His expression softened into silent reflection. "She's changed a lot," he muttered, almost to himself, while the redhead stayed completely oblivious, sleeping peacefully. The setting had become an elegant altar surrounded by natural green decorations, with a massive window in the background framing a sky full of stars. They walked together down a long red carpet. She looked flawless in a classic wedding dress, while he stood beside her in a dark suit, completing the image as if time and chaos had finally found their destined ending. The illusion of a perfect romance fills the air as flower petals fall over the couple. A girl gazes at the blonde man with complete admiration, and he returns the look with warmth. A pink-haired girl with emerald eyes declares possessively that Han Qingyang belongs to her and her alone. The fantasy is broken by a scream. Back in the reality of the hospital room, the red-haired patient jolts awake in shock. Clutching the bed in panic, she blurts out that she would never allow something like that to happen. The sudden outburst startles the blonde young man who had been quietly sitting nearby. The moment she notices him, her face burns bright red with embarrassment. She quickly pulls the blankets over herself and demands to know what he's doing there. Clearly exhausted, he fires the question right back at her, bluntly pointing out that she's the one who owes an explanation. The atmosphere turns heavy instantly. Out of patience, the blonde stands up, casting a shadow over her. Before she can even attempt an excuse, he shuts it down completely. Li Su obviously avoids people on purpose, and Gu Yuan would never hit a girl. Then, leaning in until his face is only inches from hers, he locks her in place with a sharp, intimidating stare and demands to know, once and for all, what her real plan is. The story cuts abruptly to a much more relaxed setting. Far from the tense atmosphere from before, the dark-haired protagonist and the pink-haired girl sit side by side on the couch, ready for another round of break-up restaurant. She immediately makes it clear that she trained nonstop behind the scenes and guarantees she won't drag the team down this time. Once the match ends, the dark-haired boy bursts into celebration, shouting in excitement over their victory. Right beside him, however, the girl simply sits there holding the controller, her face completely drained, radiating the boredom and exhaustion of someone who can't stand looking at another screen. Looking for praise, he turns toward his teammate expecting applause. Acting like an overly needy puppy, he asks if she noticed how much he improved at the game. She says absolutely nothing, responding only with an empty stare that screams total emotional exhaustion. The comedic tension breaks when her stomach growls loudly enough to startle him. Her face instantly turns red with embarrassment, and she curls in on herself. That's when reality finally hits the protagonist. They had gotten so obsessed with gaming that lunch had completely slipped by. Her embarrassment quickly shifts into clingy desperation. She looks at him with teary eyes, silently begging for food. Her pitiful expression instantly sends the boy into panic mode. He promises to get her something to eat immediately, all while anxiously wondering where old Han disappeared to at the worst possible moment. The food emergency is suddenly interrupted when the door swings open without warning. To everyone's surprise, the blonde young man steps into the room with the red-haired girl beside him. The redhead looks like a completely different person. Gone is the dramatic hospital meltdown. Now she avoids eye contact entirely, acting purely on instinct. Lee Soo instantly dives behind the dark-haired boy, using him as a human shield. She peeks cautiously at the newcomers with complete suspicion, leaving the poor guy frozen awkwardly in the middle of the room. The tension shifts into surprise when the redhead carefully extends her arms, revealing a stylish red and black gift box. The mysterious package immediately catches Lee Soo's attention. Lowering her head and swallowing her pride, the red-haired girl apologizes sincerely for her behavior earlier, offering the gift as a genuine peace offering. The atmosphere shifts immediately. Faced with the wrapped gift, Lee Soo's emerald eyes light up with fascination. Any lingering resentment vanishes in an instant, replaced by genuine excitement as she carefully takes the package and quietly thanks the redhead for the gesture. After confirming that he really is Gu Yuan, she shows the same humility from moments earlier and formally apologizes for the extreme actions she took. The boy doesn't make a big deal out of it. Flashing his usual easygoing smile, he brushes off any resentment and buries the conflict in the past. The blonde boy takes charge of the chaos. He practically orders Gu Yuan to get in the kitchen immediately, warning that the girl is about to pass out from starvation if she doesn't eat soon. Bursting with almost cartoonish excitement. Frantically raising her hand, she eagerly volunteers to cook. Completely embarrassed, Gu Yuan tries to stop her. Insisting it makes no sense to put a guest to work in the kitchen, the refusal changes absolutely nothing. The redhead strikes a confident pose, throws the group a wink, and stubbornly insists that preparing the feast is the ultimate way to prove her apology is sincere. With no arguments left to fire back, Gu Yuan simply sighs, accepting his fate. Kicking up dust, the girl bolts toward the kitchen like lightning. The blonde boy follows the blur with his eyes. With the chaos temporarily settled, everyone's attention shifts back to Lee Soo. Completely disconnected from the rest of the house, she quietly hums to herself while arranging her new figurines on the shelf. The peaceful moment is suddenly interrupted by the vibration of her phone. She leaves the shelf behind to check the screen, but freezes the instant she reads the message. The sender announces that the mission has finally been completed and that they managed to get a photo of the mysterious young Master Han she had personally requested. The shock hits instantly. The smiling face in the picture is, without a doubt, the blonde boy currently sitting in her living room. The story cuts straight into a memory from the past. Bright stage lights flood the scene, illuminating a flawless ballet performance. At the center of it all, the lead dancer captivates the audience with every graceful movement. In the boy's mind, the memory is untouchable. The unforgettable image of his older sister commanding the entire stage with effortless grace and a smile brighter than the spotlight itself. The curtain falls, leaving the glamour behind on stage. Inside the quiet isolation of the dressing room, the platinum-haired ballerina, decorated with feathered accessories, stares into the mirror. Silently touching up her makeup, she tries to calm the adrenaline from the performance. The piece lasts only seconds. A tiny whirlwind suddenly bursts into the room and launches itself onto her back in a crushing hug, startling her badly. The intruder is little Qingyang. The boy can barely contain his excitement as he showers his older sister with praise for her flawless performance. Melted by the child's cuteness, she blushes slightly, smiles warmly, and gently ruffles his hair in thanks. The emotional shift comes in a split second. The moment her eyes leave her brother, The ballerina's expression collapses into quiet sadness. A painful realization weighs heavily on her mind. This performance had been her final goodbye to the stage. Her career was over. Determined to shield the boy from the truth, she swallows her sadness immediately. Putting on a mask of pure cheerfulness, the young woman messes up his hair and pinches his cheeks playfully between forced laughs to hide the mood. Using theater paperwork as an excuse, she tells him to head home first. Completely oblivious to the silent heartbreak happening in front of him, the boy simply smiles innocently and agrees without hesitation. Still, the ballerina's perfect act doesn't fully fool the child. The moment he turns to leave, his smile fades. A chill runs down his spine, accompanied by the agonizing feeling that his sister is about to disappear from his life forever. The story jumps back to the present. He still carries the bitterness of that day. Right after the performance, his sister had been sent away to Singapore to take over the family business, ending her dance career for good. The trip down memory lane is abruptly interrupted by the sharp sound of a knife striking a cutting board. Back in the kitchen, the redhead wears a triumphant grin, wrapping up her cooking session. She proudly presents a table overflowing with flawless dishes like it's a trophy. The sight of the feast instantly makes the dark-haired boy start drooling, completely blown away by the quality of the food. Totally sold on the meal, he showers her with praise. The boy openly admits how relieved he is to finally have a new cook around since he was beyond tired of eating meals made by the blonde guy. Qingyang crosses his arms and frowns, firing back dryly that if the food bothered him so much, maybe he should start cooking himself. To kill the mood completely, the blonde guy decides to expose the ugly truth about the new chef's history. He casually drops the fact that her cooking skills used to be downright deadly, instantly unlocking a dark shared trauma between the two boys. The feast carries on until Gu Yuan sets aside a portion of food. He lets the cook know that Lisu prefers eating alone and volunteers to bring the plate himself. Without knocking, he throws the bedroom door wide open and loudly announces the menu. His excitement instantly crashes. Lisu is sprawled across the floor, wrapped in a heavy, gloomy atmosphere, completely absorbed in her tablet. Gu Yuan apologizes for startling her, but his eyes immediately dart to the screen. She's browsing a website that sells game account boosting services. Blunt as ever, he asks if she's doing all that for money. She freezes in complete shock. The situation spirals into absurd comedy. Gu Yuan connects the dots in the worst possible way, convincing himself that Lisu has been grinding for cash just to help him. Gu Yuan gently pats Lisu on the head, thanking her for the gesture, but firmly stands his ground. He wants to grow through his own hard work. Still awkward about the situation, Lisu takes the food. On his way out, Gu Yuan stumbles clumsily, laughs at himself like an idiot, and finally leaves her in peace. Not long after, the two somehow end up sitting side by side on the floor in comfortable silence. While she eats, Gu Yuan's usual smile fades, replaced by a much more serious expression. Breaking the silence, he brings up what happened at the cafe. With brutal honesty, he admits that when she came to save him, he felt the warmth of a real family for the first time. Lisu's eyes widen in shock. Lowering his head with a bittersweet smile, he quietly admits the painful truth. It was the first time in his life he had ever experienced what having a real home felt like. He praises her courage that day, receiving nothing in return except a calm, gentle look. Trying to lighten the mood, Lisu attempts to bring up something important about Butler Han, but immediately chokes on her food. The emotional atmosphere instantly turns into total chaos. Gu Yuan panics, screaming for help and tearing through the room searching for water, while she struggles to breathe. Only after she downs an entire container of water does the situation calm down, leaving him visibly shaken. The moment she recovers, an eerie silence takes over the house. Gu Yuan senses something is wrong, opens the door, and peeks outside. What he sees in the living room makes him scream in horror. The living room looks like a battlefield. The crazy girl is sprawled across the floor, foaming rice from her mouth while deliriously rambling about weddings. Ansai is stretched out across the carpet, his soul practically floating out of his body. The culprit sits right there on the table, toxic-looking dishes that seem straight-up deadly. Furious, Gu Yuan grabs the crazy girl and shakes her, yelling at Ansai for irresponsibly cooking poison no human should survive. Watching the disaster unfold, Lisu finally drops her cold demeanor. Her gloomy aura completely evaporates as she bursts into loud, uncontrollable laughter, nearly losing her breath over the ridiculous scene in front of her. The fun ends in an instant. The second Lisu realizes she's been caught laughing, she freezes. Her face catches fire with embarrassment. In a full mental meltdown, she bolts like lightning and slams the bedroom door shut, retreating back into her safe space. Gu Yuan is left standing alone in the hallway, staring at the closed door. But instead of getting upset, excitement bubbles up inside him. To him, seeing her genuine smile feels like a legendary achievement. Meanwhile, the crazy girl slowly wakes up, dizzy and barely functional. Wiping her mouth while trying to figure out where she is, she comes face to face with Anssi standing nearby like a guard on duty. He wastes no time and bluntly informs her that she's finally awake. The room immediately turns into a courtroom. Arms crossed, Ansai unleashes a brutal lecture about the dangers of cooking food that could literally kill people. Completely defeated and unable to argue back, the crazy girl buries herself under the blankets like a turtle, nodding in total surrender as regret crashes over her. Later, the trio regroups in the living room. The cook shrinks into the corner of the couch, humiliated and too embarrassed to even look at the other two. Gu Yuan and Anssi wait in heavy silence. Finally gathering her courage, she bows apologetically and asks in a shaky voice how long she had been unconscious. Gu Yuan drops the bomb. 4 whole hours lost to the void. Checking the time with his usual cold demeanor, Ansai points out the obvious. It's way too late now. There's no arguing about it. She'll have to stay the night. The suggestion instantly sends the redhead into a full system crash. Her face turns tomato red as her imagination starts projecting horribly embarrassing scenarios that she immediately tries to censor before she gives herself a heart attack. Gu Yuan sees the perfect opportunity. Without hesitation, he rushes forward, covers Ansi's mouth, and shamelessly lies with a sly grin, claiming the house is completely full. The redhead watches the two argue in total confusion, her heart pounding out of her chest. Cut to a dark bedroom. The blonde answers her phone and gets major news. There's a way to cancel the arranged marriage, but only if she immediately finds a new boyfriend. Her excitement dies on the spot, replaced with instant frustration. A knock at the door interrupts the mood. The redhead appears shyly in the doorway. The blonde hangs up and turns her attention to the visitor. Asking permission to turn on the light, the redhead steps into what looks like a full-on disaster zone. Clothes, trash, and leftover food scattered everywhere. The blonde lies on the floor looking completely drained and unmotivated. Trying to ignore the mess, the redhead apologizes for bothering her and explains that she'll only be staying until morning, even offering to clean the room as thanks. The blonde's green eyes widen in surprise. Trying to relax, the redhead reminds herself of Ansi's strict order to keep her identity a secret and convinces herself the two could probably become friends. The atmosphere shifts instantly when the blonde suddenly breaks the silence with a sharp, cold question, asking if the guy they're talking about is young Master Han. The question completely paralyzes the visitor. Her brain short-circuits, cold sweat dripping down her back as she forces an awkward smile, unable to hide her guilt. The blonde shrinks into herself, crushed by disappointment. Seeing her like that, the redhead carefully moves closer, gently reaches out a hand, and firmly reassures her that the boy doesn't have any bad intentions. The redhead sits behind her and changes the subject, bluntly asking whether she has feelings for the guy and how much experience she has with dating. Confused by the sudden turn, the blonde hesitates before finally opening up. Her mother will only cancel the arranged marriage if she shows up with a fake boyfriend. The shock doesn't last long. The redhead instantly takes charge, fired up with excitement. With sky-high confidence, she proudly declares herself a master of romance and promises to transform her new friend's love life. The self-proclaimed expert begins investigating the target, only to freeze when the blonde innocently asks a simple question. What does it actually feel like to like someone? The redhead gives the classic answer: butterflies in your stomach, confusion, and your heart acting weird whenever that person is around. The blonde thinks it over, does the math in her head, and concludes that she has a lot of crushes. The redhead nearly suffers a mental breakdown, imagining a giant mess involving multiple men at once. The tension immediately turns into comedy when the blonde reveals the truth. Every single one of her love interests is just a collection of anime and manga heartthrobs. Still floating through the clouds thinking about her fictional crushes, the blonde wanders toward the bathroom on autopilot. Completely distracted by her dreamy thoughts, she turns the doorknob without checking anything. Unfortunately, the shower is already occupied. Gu Yuan is inside, calmly scrubbing shampoo into his hair while casually mumbling to himself, apparently agreeing with his own thoughts. The blonde walks in wearing a goofy smile, one that instantly dies the moment the steam clears enough for her to make out the unmistakable shape of a man. Eye contact becomes unavoidable. Gu Yuan freezes under the stream of water, his reddened eyes widening in pure panic as he notices the unexpected audience. The blonde locks up in the exact same second, reality slamming back into her as her face erupts into an explosive shade of red. The bathroom falls into crushing silence, broken only by the sound of water hitting the drain and the frantic echo of two hearts pounding wildly out of control.